a hospitality slash management business for, homes up at Thunder Mountain. I think I heard you. Yeah, and so we just are constantly running into people and that are like, hey, we just would really like for you to help us find a house here at this mountain. We love it so much. And we're always like, well, maybe call my friend, the realtor then. You know, and you're referring all these people. Yeah, and you know, the situation has changed. And it obviously isn't anything that has fallen into my lap by any means, but it just happened that when I had this soul search at the end of my veterinary career, the universe was like, just do this. And I was like,
You connect with Mitch,
who's Mitch? I guess not.
Michelle, Julia? No,
No.
they want to go subdivision.
Do they? I would wonder who that is because I know the list of.
That little, they have a different spot,
Do they?
different spot.
So do you know the whereabouts exactly where it's at? Is it on the newer side or is it down?
It's right before the,
Is it? So did they just purchase it?
or it is zoned for.
Okay.
He is finishing his home and there
On
are
that
two
one,
other lots.
okay. Okay. Is it right past the Powder Ridge condo?
Are you
Backing
teaching
up the-
today?
Yes.
Remind me your name again. Wait, that's right. There's so many new names. and
I suck at
They are
names so
very
badly.
I'm just the worst, but I know I've seen it because then I really like that and I put it, I was trying to remember.
They're like-
I'm like, just ask.
Oh, if you have-
I know I'm the worst too. I'm like, hey, you.
You know what it is?
And I'm like,
Weaver. It's kind of-
If you're with someone and you're,
Well,
has
and
been introduced.
you know, with all the changes.
Yeah.
well, we had our pumpkin event last night too, and like, some of my clients would come around the corner, and I'm like, hurry. Like, oh, my wife's there, and I'm like, I gotta introduce them, and I'm like, even some of the agents, I'm like, just brain dead sometimes. I'm like,
But
I
that's
know
a
their
good
name.
resource because
So you got.
Well, and it, cause
fish
we
right
deal
here.
with so many people and so many names right now. So
Yeah.
I was like, should be able to.
and you're learning so many new people, and
Okay, so there's
Two lots.
Skylodge, there's Skylodge,
Sky Lodge,
okay,
this is his house and this.
can I just get a visual on that a little bit better? What's the Aspen Ridge?
Rich is big.
Oh, Aspen Ridge is there, okay. So there's our Powder Mountain Road.
that's pretty cool, so that's a nice connection you have. I
Yeah,
know that you
they're
can
beautiful
help them.
people. They,
And so anyways,
he happens to be the parent council board director of my kids' school.
oh, that,
He's like super involved.
what school is that?
That's Monticello.
Well, I'll tell you what, me and my husband have grown up on that mountain and we've seen a lot of changes and we've kind of learned to roll with it and just try to make sure that the bottom line is that we just want the mountain to continue to thrive and be available. It just hasn't gotten a lot of love with all the changes that it's gone through over the last 10 years. And I've always said, you know, I understand the bitterness on the part of the locals and the resistance to any more change, but at the same time, I just think that there is so much to embrace about what Reed's trying to do up there, you know, and a lot of people want to criticize him, but the more I learn about him and learn about, you know, what they're doing up there in his career, and then the more I'm here and hearing really successful agents speak, I see a lot of parallels, you know, and so I feel like that just reinforces to me that he's a good person for this position. Nobody's gonna get everything that they want, you know, you're not gonna make all the people happy, but he is a successful businessman in several other areas, not just Netflix. Yeah, you know, he actually has helped bring up and build ski resorts in other communities in overseas. So I'm like, come on, guys, like, I realize we management, you know, and ownership, et cetera. And you fill that down, but what's the alternative? The mountain's gonna die. The mountain's gonna shut down. Really? Oh, absolutely.
do you guys have a sample contract that you have been working with or not?
I do, like a purchase one, I do right now.
No, like, just for the class, did you guys have like a sample
Oh.
contract that you've been working working with at all.
No.
They're just notes.
You won't. And for the other people doing the class too, like, it seems like what they're going off of and the slides are different, like, the slides don't always match, I guess, what they're, yeah. I've
They're
heard
not
comments-
identical.
Oh,
I've
okay.
noticed that too, when you go through them, they don't have all of the same things, like sometimes there's more slides than what's in the book. The book, I think, is geared more towards only having things that you guys are gonna like fill out
Really, oh, okay,
and like your little like brainstorming sessions, things like that,
Got
so.
okay.
I don't know where Rusty's at. Bam. There's.
This doesn't actually start till 5:30, so guess what you get to do? Is this your first time teaching Ignite this session?
This session, yes.
You're in the hot seat.
The hot seat,
Let me find my phone with my question.
it's right here.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you a funny phone story? Yesterday? Or Tuesday? I think you were here when it happened. So my phone, I couldn't find my phone anywhere, and I was like, what the heck? And it wouldn't ping from my watch. My watch was being weird. It had done some weird update, and it wouldn't ping it. Like it was saying it wasn't connected.
There's a new one out.
I know.
That's
why.
what it's doing.
That's exactly
So
right.
what'd you have to do?
Well, I updated it and then it reconnected. I don't know.
Oh.
But I couldn't ping it. I couldn't find my phone anywhere. And I am like notorious for like, I'll set it on the podium and I don't know where it's at. That's why the number one thing I would use my watch for was this. Oh, see, look, now I'm seeing it again. It's not connected. Keep doing this. Oh, so annoying. Anyway. So
Now she's triggered.
I'm triggered. So I don't remember who it was that, oh, can you go to find your iPhone on your laptop?
I'm like, I'm gonna make you mad.
Oh. And so I did it for my laptop. And this is after looking at it for like 10 minutes. I'm like, somebody must have grabbed it. I just thought it was theirs. And so I'm like, I can hear it. I'm like walking up through. And then Anita, do you know Anita? So Anita Olberry, she's one of our agents. She's freaking awesome. Her and Misha are together on a team and it's in her bag, like zipped up. That's Anita's bag. And she opens it. and she- oh my gosh, I bet she thought it was hers and stuck it in her bag. And so then I was talking to Anita later. She goes, the worst part about Russie, I was on my phone when I was gathering my things and putting it she goes, on my phone. When I picked it up, I said, that's okay. I've been like, trying to like get out of the house and I'm like, I can't even find my phone. And my husband's like, well, you're literally talking to me on it. So it's gotta be like on your body. I was like, oh, on your- got it. Anyway, it was hilarious. So it made me laugh because I was like, I said, well, thank goodness that, I think it was Tommy was like, ping it from your laptop because my watch wasn't
Oh.
connecting.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good idea, because then I can go to find my iPhone, which it will show me where it was.
Oh.
So even if somebody did grab it accidentally, because they look the same when they're just sitting down, you know,
Yeah.
sitting like face up like this.
Right.
Like they look the same. So I was thinking how funny it would have been because Anita lives like in Ogden Valley.
Oh.
And all of a sudden I just like see my phone pop up on somebody's
Yeah.
app.
It's all driving up the canyon.
Like, oh, you know. Funny, huh? Okay, Wade, we're gonna have Wade tell us a little bit about himself since it's his first time
You just
teaching
have a bunch
Ignite
of
today.
random questions you have to.
Yeah, where are they though? Cause I thought they were in my notes and you know what, I just remembered they're not. Well, 'cause I recently did a little interview. And so I pulled up some questions. Let's see, Wade. I think we gotta keep watching to see if anything's moving. But, Wade. What motivated you to get into real estate and when?
I've always been really motivated, like interested in real estate. It's kind of funny because a lot of the things I've done in my other jobs have always like been towards somebody's home sort of thing, so. I worked retail for a very, very long time. And when Brian wanted to help me sell my house. They kind of sparked the interest. Corey's like, you'd be really good, you should do it. I went with a brokerage like 10 years ago, did pull the trigger, as you know, in your happy place and you, I don't know if that's happy. You're comfortable, right?
Yeah.
It's settled, you're comfortable and scared to make a change. But what finally motivated me was just COVID was like too much.
Mm.
Like
In the retail world.
working retail and I mean, I always busted my butt anyways. I always try to be like the best I can at something. And that was just rough. Like I worked from 4 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. And like, after doing it for a year straight and like realizing like, oh, like you haven't seen your kids for a week because you came to home when they were going to bed and they were at school and you were at work all day. Like, so finally I was just like, I can't do this. So I tried to get my license and do both, but me being OCD like I am and wanting to be the best of both, I knew it was no possible way. So I just jumped in full on and made it work. It was
Love it.
scary, but it's good.
How did you get your first client?
My first client was a lead. Which ended up being, it was like a good thing and not a good thing. So we had a lead program when I first started here that we tried to do with our coaching program. And the leads would come and you have to click on it so fast and be the first person to contact them, right? And
Speed the lead.
yeah, try to get them out there as quick as possible and seal the deal, right? So I was super stoked because I was like, oh, I don't have to mess up on like one of my friends or client, like family members. Like I don't have to, if I'm gonna flop, at least it's someone that doesn't know me, right?
Yeah.
And so it ended up being the easiest transaction ever. Like showed them one house. It was next to like, it was 2 doors down from their brother. They like already had pre-approval. Like it was dumb because it was like, I didn't learn anything from this.
I
It
was
was
gonna
too
say,
easy. It was
right?
too easy. Why? So it was like, it was too quick and painless. And I was like, that didn't do any good. Like, so that's how I got my first.
Funny thing about, so this is, I think that I always use that source of leads as an example because it's interesting, online leads especially, right? Because that we still do some lead generation once you've got some transactions under your belt within the coaching group that are a different lead source, but same thing, right? It's people you can call and it's leads. And the interesting thing that I always find about internet leads is that there's 2 groups of people that get internet leads. And there's the people who call me and say, these leads suck, I don't want them anymore. And then there's the people who are tenacious about the leads and they're quick to respond to them and they do great follow-up with them. And those are the people that like almost half of your business last year came from an online lead source that when you started that lead source, there was like 10 people that have the same exact opportunity. And there's 2 people that still continuously close from that lead source that now I can't even add people into that lead source anymore. Like that lead source doesn't exist except for if you're like already part of it. Unless you go do it, like as a brokerage, we can't do it anymore. You have to do it as an agent individually, and it's like $4,000 a month for an individual agent to do it. And so I always think of
I
that.
had like 6 of the agents complain about how crappy the
Crappy
leads
the
were.
leads are,
Right? I'm like,
And I'm always like, I just feel like that's always a good lesson because it's how you look at it, right? And then the other thing that I've had is like, when people are like, well, I don't want to work the leads because the split's too high. And I'm like, but you would have never had that lead. That was a lead that would have never come to you. So is the split too high? Because 50% of nothing is still nothing, right? And so it's just an interesting, I think that's a good, I always think it's such a good reminder to remind people like leads are what you make of them. And keeping in mind, people start looking online about 18 months or more in advance that they start looking online and just poking around to see houses, see what they look like. And they don't actually start to respond until about 7 to 10 attempts in. And so if you call one time and they don't answer and you hang up the phone and go, that's a crappy lead, delete, and you then come and say, that's a crappy lead, all I get is crappy leads. You're just not gonna, they just won't get them. And also any lead source, keep in mind too, like if you do join any online lead generation sources or lead aggregators, a lot of times they will track your performance because particularly ones that don't get paid unless you close, because there are some that you don't pay as much per month, but you pay a heftier referral split with them. Those ones, they want to send to people who are going to convert, right? And whether they convert it today or 6 months down the road or 12 months down the road, they want to know that they can have people that convert. So I think it's an important thing. And where does most of your business come from now is your SOI, right? And so I think that most people go, SOI should always be your number one source. It just should be. It's the easiest business to convert. And if you don't have enough leads there, how can you gain other leads? But I think it's having an open mind. And I also feel like a lot of people want to jump instantly into paid lead sources. And I don't think that should be your first spend of what you're doing.
And
with
on
your-
that
your
note
budget.
too, like, the only reason that was my first closing is because I was in my own way. Honestly, like I got, that was like 7 months in to having my license, 6 months into having my license before I even closed the deal. And I have a lot of agents in my sphere, like close sphere. Like I used to work with Julie and Mark at AOL, like they know all the people I know. Forever ago, Corey and Rhonda, we went to the gym together. All of my people that I knew out there knew them. Blaine Larson, I went to high school with. These are all like top performing agents within the brokerage who have been doing business like for 20 years.
Yeah.
Each of them. So I'm like, okay, if I am a friend group in my group, like, and I'm gonna choose somebody, I'm sure it's only gonna be me. I ain't picking the newbie. I'm going with one of these 10 years. Like I've got 7 other heavy hitters. Why would I choose me? So I was in my own head of like, how can I sell myself and say that I'm the best agent when I know for a fact they've got better options? So I think getting the confidence and trying to learn so much before I like truly got into like finding business
Was a huge.
was a downfall. Like I sold myself short.
Yep.
So until I actually got into business and started doing and realizing that I was capable and functional and I could compete with those guys.
And I think that this is, I actually love that you said that, and that wasn't even like scripted, but I'm glad you said it, because I was gonna bring that up, because I do think a lot of times we get in our own way, right? And we think that we need to, if we go to one more class, if we learn one more thing, if we do something else, it's gonna make you worthy to be able to handle the client or to know enough. And the reality is, like, I know, like me personally, there's things even still, I've been in business a long time. I've been in business for 17 years. I don't even just get to see my own transactions. I get to see all of your transactions. I get to help a lot of you work through them. I see, like, Wade will call me with stuff. I hear like high level problems really often. And even 17 years later, I don't know everything, but I know I can always find the solution. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like, you don't even necessarily have to be confident in knowing that you're going to know anything, but you have to be confident that you're going to have a resource to go to. And the other thing that I always did know is I care so much about the people on the other side of the track. Like, I care about my clients so much, and I care about them believing that I am worth what I charge and that I did a great job for them, that I knew I really truly have always believed, like, nobody else is going to do a better job for that person, because I really do believe that I'm going to do everything possible to do the very best for them. And so, like, I'm sure Wade's a great agent, but if one of my clients is like, oh, should I go with you or Wade? And they're like, well, you run an office too. I'm still not going to be the best, even though Wade may have more time to deal with them. And I think Wade thinks the same thing, right? And I think that's the difference, is it's, if I had sat in a classroom and thought, I've got to learn more before I can actually start putting myself out there and gaining confidence to go do business, you're going to sit in this classroom and you're going to play like on the sidelines, and you have to get into the game, because that's how you learn, right? Like
I
you
had
said,
like
your
60 hours of CE
your first year.
before, like, yeah, like I almost 70 hours of CE, and like all these other things that I've done and these other classes I've gone to, and like Ignite and
Yeah.
the
And
thing
they're
is
important.
it's great, I
And-
gained knowledge, but I wasn't putting any of it to work because I wasn't actually doing the work. So
Yeah.
like, it's great if I learned a thing and I had a packet and then it went in my desk,
Yeah.
and like I was stuck on, I have to be the best at what I do, no matter what. I have to know everything, I have to know the ins and outs. Like, that was a hard pill for me to swallow. It's like, you're not always gonna be the most knowledgeable. And then again, myself was like the biggest limiting belief. I knew I could still do a great job for my clients. I just didn't believe that I could convey that or show that. And the biggest aha for me was when I finally just got out there and started doing business, and I started having open houses and posting on social media and all that stuff. And then I went to a party at Blaine's house with all of our friends, and 2 of them were like, bro, you're killing it. You're kicking ass. Like, you were meant to do real estate. I was like talking about my business, how great I'm doing. Not one person said anything to Blaine. And he was just staring at me like, are you serious? Like, you're not invited anymore. And I was like, I only closed like 2 deals, but like, they automatically got the confidence in me because I put myself out there. I was confident in what I was doing. So I didn't even have to like I didn't have to sell myself to them, like they saw the work that I put in and.
Yeah.
They already have the confidence that I didn't have to fake it.
And that's like the easiest kind of business, right? Like repeat referral business from people that already know, like, and trust you. And then the people that are like, yeah, Wade did a great job, or Wade's crushing it. And they're gonna go tell their people, and then they tell their people. And now it's just your job to make sure you're in front of them, right? Now it's your job to be consistently in conversation with them and be in front of them. But you're not necessarily having to say every day, like, I'm the greatest there ever was, right? Because you're providing value, you're doing your quarterly calls, you're talking to them, you're staying top of mind, which then they go, oh, well, Wade's top of mind as a realtor, so I'm gonna give this referral.
And those are
And
the
that's the
best
best kind of
ever. When you get a referral, like the last one I had too, I go over there with all my stuff, my listing, right? Never met her. It's a friend's mom. I'm going through my house bill and she's like, okay, like, we're going with you. We're not going with anybody else. There's no, and I like, where do we sign? And I was like, oh, okay, like, still want to show you all the value, but like.
Yeah.
If you
They're
come
just
highly
like,
recommended and you,
Solid, and how much can we pay?
yeah, they don't care. Those are the best. You're like, oh, get used to this.
Okay, one last question, and then we gotta get started. Let's see. What do you think, what impact has coaching or mentoring played in your career?
It's like everything. Honestly, like that's the biggest impact I think is, especially with KW, that's like one of the best things I love about being at this brokerage. It's like everybody is so collaborative and willing to share, and it's like open door. Everyone, nobody cares if you ask them about their business, they'll help you share any of their model systems. I mean, even in general, when we go to our conferences and stuff, right, like mega camp, all that stuff, you get one pagers from top agents who have, you know, built $1 million businesses, and they're just like, here, this is what we do, this is our playbook, like, you can have it, copy it, go run with it. So just knowing that you've got the support of the brokerage too, gives you the confidence to go out there and tackle all that stuff. So coaching has been huge impact.
One thing that you said is like, even the top agents will give you their playbooks. And this is one thing that I hope that whether people stay at KW for their entire career, or whether they decide at some point that they go to a different brokerage, or whether they decide this career isn't even for them, I hope that you carry a little piece of that abundance mindset with you. Because I actually just had a conversation yesterday with an agent. And the mindset that she's in, and it's not an agent here, it's one of so much scarcity. And she's making so many decisions out of a scarcity mindset, and it's actually impacting her business negatively. Because everything she's doing is, there's not gonna be enough business, so I'm gonna grab as much as I can here. Because there's not gonna be enough to go around, and I don't wanna share what I'm doing here because there's not enough to go around. And that's just not the case, guys. Like, there still is so many transactions happening in times where business is tougher or slower. That's really where the very best agents come in and take market share, and they rarely ever give it back. So that's one of the things that I do love and appreciate so much, is you have people on the stage that literally could build a bunker around themselves, have their own brokerage, and never ever share anything that they're doing with anyone else again. They could make every person that comes on their team sign an NDA and never be able to use any of their systems again. And it's the exact opposite. It's like, here's what I'm doing and I'm actually crushing it. You should go try it too. Because the reality is, you're going to put your spin on it, and there's enough business to go around. And what better for all of us if we all rise together, right? So
And
anyway,
that may
I
not
hope
work for
that's
you.
it.
That may
That
not
may
be
not
the thing
work
that
for you,
you
right?
love to do, or
Yeah.
not be your niche, right? Like,
Yep. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm like, that's so cool, and I never want to do that. Right? And so to me, I'm like, you're safe in that zone, because I don't ever want to do business like that. And there's other things where I'm like, I love this much of it, but I love this, but I only want to take this. And this is a piece I can go implement. And that's the other thing. I think it's important to go to trainings, go to classes, be engaged. And I think if you wanted to take it one step further, I would just say, and I said this at the beginning of Ignite, is because I think I did the kickoff class too. And I was like, don't just come here and go through the motions and then leave and not think about it again until you open your book back up 2 days later. Come here and actually do the actions, like take the action, because that's where you're going to find it. So every class, because
even if it's one little.
even if it's one thing, I was going to say,
Because then you get overloaded.
and family reunion is a good example, because it's 5 days of just like massive content. I'm like, your eyes are watery by the end of it. And you're just like, holy crap.
When you leave it like this on the plane, you're
Yeah.
like, can't process.
Been a system in my notes that instantly go to the things that I'm like, that's something I want to implement immediately, right? So I'll take like a whole page of notes, but then I'm like, before I leave, I just take a minute, or if there's something I can hear in it, I take my notes on my iPad and I can change the color of ink that I'm writing with in my note app. And so if there's something where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like needs my attention, I'll write it in red and I'll like outline it with a highlighter color. And then those are the things that I'll go take, because I think, you know what, anything you're spending your time on, you're taking time away from something else to be in this class tonight. So if you sit here tonight and you just walk out and go, that was cool, and you don't do anything else with it,
You're like, I gotta blink.
you took time away from people that you could have been giving time to be in this class today. So no matter what class you're in, that's the other thing, just like everything that you attend, try to find a way of what value did you bring from it. And it may just be, you know what, the value was that that's a cool system, but it's not my cool system, and I don't want to do that, right? And that could be the value. But always, if you take the time to identify, like, what was the little one or two things that would help me with a client, or maybe there's times where I'm like, that's somebody that I want to know because I don't want to have that type of client or whatever it is, right? Like, I don't do a lot of X business, but so-and-so does. And now it's somebody that I'm connected to that I can be like, oh, you know what? I just found your exact client that's your ideal client for wherever you are, right? So I just think no matter what you do, figure out a way to take some value out of it, because you took time out away to be here. And if you walk out and just brush it away and go, well, whatever, then you're shorting yourself. So.
Yeah.
Shall we jump in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Any questions for Wade, I guess, before we jump
And I'm
Any
still like a
burning
newbie.
questions?
I think I'm a newbie still. Maybe we always think. I've been in the business for just a little over 2 years, so.
Well, and I like what you said, and what I love KW and the helping and the sharing, and here's what I do that is successful. Because also, I do feel like even if you pass along a client or something, I feel like that comes back to you.
For sure.
Also, you know.
It totally does. And this is the thing, like referral business too, because I think that a lot of times, especially, let's go back to that scarcity mindset, right? And especially in the beginning, like it's hard if you have someone that calls you and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to buy a house in St. George. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's a 5-hour drive from here. And there's a part of people that want to take it and they're just like, oh, I'm going to do it anyway. And in my head, I'm always just like, I'm not the best person to service that client. We have had people that, and you can, right? Your license carries you anywhere in the state of Utah. But I've had people who are like, well, I'm going to get licensed in Idaho because I have a family member that's going to buy a house there. And it's pretty easy to get licensed. And I'm like, but are you really the best option for that person? Because if you're not, it's going to come back full circle to you eventually. I have some great referral partners in St. George, because guess what? This is my rule. If I would not personally drive there to put the key box on, I'm not taking the listing or I'm not servicing a buyer in that area. And I go to St. George at least 5-6 times a year because we have an office there, and I still would service clients there. And the reason why is because I don't know the ins and outs of the HOAs and which ones are nightly rentals and
You're
which
not
ones are, and
actively
which
in the
ones are this.
market
I'm
to
not
see what
actively in the market.
concessions are being given.
And me giving that referral away is actually still me getting income and retaining my integrity of how do I serve that client the best, right? So remember how earlier I said, I don't know everything, but I know enough to know I can find the answers. The answer is, I'm not your person, but I know who is. And I've had clients where I worked with them once, was a referral from a friend of mine, was to a family member. And at the end of the transaction, I said to my husband, I'm like, remind me, I am never working with him. And then he called me to sell his house. And I did it, and I started listing it, and I was like home one night, and Jed goes, hey, I thought you were never working with him again. And I was like, I know I wasn't. And here I am. And it reiterated, like, we were just not a good match for each other.
Yeah.
He was not my ideal client. It was, everything was, and so I sold that house, and then they got into another one, and then they called me again recently, and I was like, you know what, I'm not your best bet in that area. I do work that area, but I'm just not the best fit. I'm going to connect you with someone else. And I did. And you know what? That was the best, like 75% of a commission I ever gave away. And the best 25% I ever got, because it protected my time, my peace, my things, that freed up space for me to serve whoever else, right? When that person, and the person I connected them with, by the way, they were a great fit for each other, their personalities got along better, like, they were each other's people, that wasn't my people. And so that's okay too,
Yeah.
right? Like, you get to choose that, which I love about this industry.
And
All right.
sometimes you'll learn after you have a few of those nightmare clients, you're gonna be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
next time,
You say that, and then you're
It'll
like,
be-
next time I'm not.
it'll be so much better to just collect a referral."
Yeah.
So we're gonna go, you guys have already been through almost everything, last two pieces.
Last two classes.
Get to the close, which I think is the most important part. If I guess you want this to be your business, right? So we're gonna talk about timelines, best practices, and risk avoidance, referrals and reviews, post-close, follow-up, recaps and ahas, and. So real estate transactions aren't particularly trouble-free. It's strenuous and trying time that requires all the attention and effort you can command. That's the worst part is I think when you get under contract with something, you automatically just think like, deal's done, like I'm gonna get paid, but it's not always the case. Deals can fall apart all the time, so,
Clear till the last minute.
right? So we're gonna talk about getting to a successful close, because again, not all of them make it to the closing table, right? Timelines, deadlines and contracts. I feel like you should be like a scribe.
I would love to. Did you guys use, because I have not been here the last few times. Have they been going through a contract? Do you have a contract that
That's
you've
what I
been
have,
using?
no.
Oh, you already asked that? Okay, perfect. So have you all been to the contracts class?
No.
No.
Okay.
So you guys will have a little timeline, I think, in your booklet, right? You've got the little timeline there. So you guys can use those to like, to fill in the deadlines.
Okay.
On there. I don't know if you wanna.
Yep.
Draw them on there or not. It's pretty much gonna be the same thing that's on the slides, but. So you'll have these little timelines. We're gonna start with the contract acceptance. So. Basically, in general, it kind of has three main pieces, I guess we could add in. The finance and appraisal is probably a big
I
one.
was
That
gonna
probably
say,
should be up there.
The actual deadlines too, like
Yes.
they'll see on the contract. But contract acceptance, so when you're writing a contract, what do you think the appropriate time frame for, from the time you write the contract until it should be accepted would be? What do you guys think?
That it's written to accept.
From the time you present it, so
Okay.
my buyer signs it on today, October, what day is it, 10th? Today on the 10th, and I send it to Wade. How much time should I give Wade to accept the contract?
3 business days.
But
depends
however you
on-
write the contract is however long you wait, however you've written it, because you pick it.
But just as like an average, what would you say? If you couldn't get a hold of the agent, I called Wade, need an answer, it's thinking.
3 business days.
3 business days.
I'm gonna give you 24 hours.
I don't
Or
think,
48
Candy,
hours,
they can
depends.
hear us.
If it's on a
Okay.
weekend, right?
Yeah.
and they've
I don't
got
think they have the
notations
volume
that
turned
they're
up
not
over
gonna
there.
do business on the weekend, they're gonna get back to you Monday, there's no point in putting it.
Thanks,
Um,
Jason.
Sure.
If it's a hot property, I don't wanna give 3 days.
Right.
I want them to respond quickly, because I want a chance to other offers.
And here's where your communication with the other agent comes into play a lot, right? So if I call Wade, and this is a little different conversation than me just sending it, I say, hey Wade, I just wanted to check with you. I've got an offer I'm gonna be sending over. And is 24 hours, do you think 24 hours gives you enough time to be able to get with your client and review the offer? But so if I put this at tomorrow at 5 p.m., is that gonna give you enough time? And
And that
Karen
goes
will
a
tell you.
long way.
It's a long way, right? Because remember on the contract, if you look on the last page, let me actually have you read it. It says, wait, this is not. Offer in time for acceptance. The buyer offer to purchase the property on the above terms and conditions. If the seller does not accept this offer by whatever time, Mountain Standard Time, on whatever day, this offer shall lapse and the brokerage shall return any earnest money deposit to the buyer. So what that means is they only have to accept it by that time frame. They could counter 2 days later if they wanted. But here's the thing, I wanna make it easy for Wade to just accept my offer, right? So I'm like, hey, how long do you think it would take for you to chat with your client? And if they were gonna accept this, that would need for you to be able to review it with them. And if Wade tells me 24 hours, then I already know that's a reasonable time frame for him to be able to get with his client and for me to be able to, now he doesn't have to counter me. If I just put in 24 hours and maybe Wade's got a trust and they've got to talk to their trustees and he knows it's going to take them at least 48 hours to 72 hours to get back to him. If I write the contract that way and they like the offer, now they don't have to counter it. They can just accept it. But if they counter it, if they don't respond by that deadline we put in there, now it has to be a counter. Well, if I'm countering one thing, I'll counter whatever else I want, right?
Might as well,
Might as well.
right?
So I think 24 to 48 is a good rule of thumb.
And that's always best practice. If you guys are gonna write an offer for your clients, like not only do you wanna call the agent to have that conversation, but I call because I try to get as much information as I possibly can that's gonna benefit my client, right? And that's gonna help us get to the end of the closing. You'll have some agents that just don't know how to close their mouth and they will tell you everything you want to know and
Yeah.
more. And you'll have some that are like, write up your best offer and submit it through and we'll take a look at it, right? And some of those clients have said, yes, you can tell them all this information, and some are like, no, I don't want you to share that information.
Yeah.
But some agents will give you way more information than that you need, and it can greatly impact the offer that you're writing and benefit your client. The other thing is too, is like, have those conversations about deadlines, right? Do they need something quick? Are they okay holding off? If your clients have a house to sell, are they open to contingent offers? Like, there's no point in wasting everybody's time if those people are not even gonna entertain your offer. But you can get a lot of the information from them as far as what their clients are actually looking for and what's gonna seal the deal, right? And if you've got other offers that are coming in and they're not doing that same information, yours is gonna be tailored to exactly what that client wants. And they're gonna go with your offer. So
Online testing. Oh, here we go.
Can you hear us?
we can start to hear you now.
Top speak again.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Hi.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you for the heads up. I did not realize the sound was off.
No worries.
Okay.
So, I was gonna say, what do you guys think? So I think they've got a buyer's timeline in here. Don't wanna give you all the stuff right off the bat. What do you guys think as far as, a buyer's timeline? What are some of the things that would need to be on there from the time that you get the contract acceptance? What are some of the things that your buyers are gonna need to be communicated with your buyers? What are your buyers' needs? Let's say, we'll have a questionnaire in here.
Lending approval.
Earnest
Oh.
money.
Earnest money, right?
Home inspection,
Home inspection.
When do they have to turn in earnest money?
That has to be within 4 days,
Calendar or business?
calendar.
Yes.
business.
Calendar. Within 4 calendar days. This
That's
one
why I have
tricks a lot of
Claudia.
peop- This one tricks people because you think to yourself, well, if it's earnest money deposit, it's banks, right? So why would Saturday and Sunday count? But remember, the 4 days in the contract that you have is to receive the earnest money. And then the brokerage actually has, from the time we receive it, an additional 4 days to deposit it. It just doesn't say that in the contract, but we actually have, so if we receive it on a Tuesday, we have, right?
And that's from acceptance of offer, right?
Yep. Which is different than it used to be. So it used to be you could check a box that you already received it or that you would receive it within, and at that time it was 3 days. So us old timers sometimes get tripped up.
So collect within 4 days, deposit within 4 days.
So seller disclosure, does everybody know what the seller's disclosure is? What happens during that period of time and why that's important on a buyer's timeline? How much time would you want for that? Is that even part of the list?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a section on here we can go over. There's a little questionnaire you guys can fill out before we fill in these, I guess, would be a good thing. So one of the things that can kind of skew things and affect your timelines and can give you issues is like, you're obviously, let's say you're the buyer's agent, right? You're obviously gonna communicate with the buyer and probably like the lender as well, but who else do you think like is involved in that communication and that transaction that you guys are gonna be communicating with? You guys have a little section here that you can fill out if you're working with a buyer. That just says who is working directly with me, to help my buyer in this transaction. So give me some
Title company.
people that you think. So title,
That's one thing that I didn't realize how important that is, actually, that you communicate, and share that information with them ASAP.
so besides the buyer, the seller, the buyer's agent, and the listing agent, who else do we have? We've got title company,
The lender.
the lender,
Home inspector, is that what you said?
yep, home inspector,
And appraiser?
appraisers.
Keep in mind on the appraiser, yes, you will probably communicate with them, especially if you're the listing agent. On the buy side, this is all gonna be handled from your lender, but they may communicate with you sometimes to set up to set up the going through the house or make sure utilities on or whatever.
Yeah.
Melissa, you said you didn't realize how important the communication was with the title company. Tell me, why do you think that's so important?
Well, they're handling everything. Like, they're gathering all the documents, they're putting together the settlement. Is it a settlement disclosure or settlement?
Settlement statement.
Statement,
Mhm.
that's the word I was thinking of. And, they're doing the check on the home,
Mhm.
making sure liens, it's free and clear, there's, you've got all the owners of the property.
Right.
Yeah, they're like dotting i's and crossing t's for you. and they
Judgments
include-
that are on there that can affect.
They call that cloud on the title.
Yep, so the title company their job is to be a fiduciary to the client, right? And they're a neutral third party that disperses funds. But they also, and the reason it's important to get them the contract early is because you said a cloud on title, you mentioned judgments, we've said liens. So what the title company does, and this is why it's really important when you're listing the property, the minute that I know that I'm listing the property, like I'll say to them, okay, I'm gonna be working with Amex Title, is that okay? I'm gonna send it over to them first thing tomorrow morning. I do that even before I do that before we order photos or anything else, and I don't wait for the PR to come back, like I keep everything moving forward. But I want them to have time, because PR stands for a preliminary report. And basically what the title company is doing is they're looking at the title, they go way back with it, and they're making sure that this is, because they issue title insurance on the home. So they go through and make sure, are there judgments on here that we need to clear before we go to closing? If you guys were in team meeting on Tuesday, Heather was here talking about some of the things that you see. So I love that you brought up title company, because a lot of people don't think about that, and you really do need to get them your contract pretty early. They're checking to make sure there's no judgments. There's times I've had like child support, past due child support that was attached to my buyer or was attached to the seller. And then because they run both parties for liens to make sure that there's any judgments or liens that could affect them being able to close on the property. I've had times where they had a judgment from like a medical bill that went to a creditor years ago that they didn't even remember, and it had a judgment against them, and it showed up as when they ran their name as the
Or they
judgment.
even paid off the liens and they're still showing.
And they're still there, right? And those things can be overcome. Like I've had people that are like, oh my gosh, no, we paid that. I'm like, great. All we gotta do is be able to clear it with the title company, and that's their job, is to do all those things. Sometimes that can take a little bit of time.
They're kind of almost there to help bulletproof your transaction too. They're gonna uncover the stuff that you can't always pry from your clients. So, there could potentially be other people involved too, like there could be tenants, right, that have to be conversated with. Your buyers could be dealing with movers, right? HOAs, contractors, if things need to be done, family members, like it or not. They're always, it's like the worst ever when the dad
once
comes to the
had-
inspection, and you're like, what are they doing here? I told you no.
I had one,
Go on.
their clergyman was there, basically, in all the houses with us. She was a single girl, little old her buying a house all by herself. She needed a big, strong man to come look with her, and he did. But at the end of the day, he was someone that she trusted with an opinion, and like it or not, he was someone that I was communicating with, right? Whether he was buying a house or not.
So we can start filling out your.
Talk to the gigolo, you don't know.
Would
who
any,
Decision makers are.
any decision makers?
So now that we know all the people that we have to deal with in the transaction, right, we can kind of build out a timeline as far as what we have to do and who we have to communicate with. So once your contract is accepted, you guys have your little guide up top. We're gonna fill in that top section on there. What do you guys think that should be that first pin?
As to who you contact after acceptance.
Yeah, so ideally, and this goes back to just communication, right? You guys want to have as much communication with your guys' clients as possible. So whether you have a transaction coordinator to assist you, or you have an assistant, or you do it all yourself, come up with a system, and that would be good to show in command too, I guess, with you can fill in all your little to-dos, your little checklists that are in there for every section as you drag them along the transaction. But this is one of the biggest things that'll kill your deal. Like, I think kill your deal is just not having the right communication with the clients, right? If you're not giving them the knowledge they need of what's next, and sometimes they may do things that they're not supposed to, and it's, as long as you have good communication, that's gonna be the best thing for you. So once you guys go under contract, you're probably gonna wanna get an inspection ordered, right? So first thing I would say to do in that timeline would be to, contact your buyer and give them a list of preferred inspectors, right? Give them some options of who you work with, who you know and trust. We'll give them an opportunity to check. So if you've got the little booklet, you can fill it in there. The first one is, inspector list to buyer. That's just prepping them, right? Letting them know about the earnest money. So earnest money is gonna come next. That's when you're gonna tell them what options they have with earnest money. Whether they're gonna wire it in, if they're gonna send a check. If they need to get it from a family member, and all the things that they're gonna have to do to keep that safe. But earnest money would be your next little pin drop on there.
I think one that I would do even before any of that is your lender. If you're
Yes.
not, if it's not a cash deal, and if you're getting financing, as soon as you go under contract, one email should go out to your
Yeah.
lender and your title company at the exact same time. So that they can get working on it. Depending on the lender, hopefully they've done a really great job at pre-approving and pre-qualifying them, but you just never know. And sometimes you'll run into issues even with the house itself. That maybe that house they thought could go FHA, but it's in a condo complex that isn't approved, and they're gonna need a spot approval, which could take longer. So I think as soon as possible, get that to your lender and your title company so they can start working on it.
Yes, that's a huge thing. Is like the second you guys have a contract executed, it should go out to your, whoever's in your team, right? Title should get a copy, lender. And then as far as your buyer communication, that's just gonna be on your end as far as what you're communicating to them, right? We're gonna need to get an inspection done. If they choose to do it, here's your list of people, here's your earnest money. Obviously, I think that conversation should obviously happen before you guys ever go on the contract, right? They should all be covered in advance.
And also like, extra expenses like for a home inspection, right?
Yeah.
And all that should have been, hopefully we covered that too, but
Yeah.
that's a good thing to cover in
Maybe like
your,
reiterate.
in your consultation, and that is perfect, like when you're reiterating that, so you're like, oh, remember when we talked about earnest money? I'm gonna need that within 4 calendar days, and you're gonna get a request from me through Earnest. You guys, just start using Earnest first. If, like, use the app. Don't
It's so
try to go
easy.
pick up a check all the time, like, just use it.
Where is that?
You'll know what it is when you go under contract, but it's how we collect earnest money at the brokerage.
Oh, okay.
And it really works for them almost like a wire transfer, but it's not a wire transfer, so you're not dealing with wire instructions. And then also have like a template or a checklist that you use every time, so that you're not constantly, like Wade said, send them a list of your inspectors. Wade has that, I'm sure, in an email that says, here's my preferred inspectors. And I give them like, oh, and remember the inspection. And then once the inspection's set up, I'm like, okay, just so you know, remember you're gonna have to pay the inspector, and depending on who it is, I'm like, they prefer Venmo or check. If you pay by credit card, you can, but you'll have to pay a fee online to pay by credit card. Right? So there's things like that that you're just reminding them along the way. 'Cause a lot of people forget that, or they don't think they need to pay for an inspection upfront. They have to pay for it.
And that's like when I'm having the conversation of like, hey, give them, the full rundown. What do you know about purchasing a home? Like, have you guys done pre-approval or whatever? Do you have cash down? Like, how much are you bringing to the table? That's when I have that conversation, right? You're gonna need your down payment. If you don't have a program that's gonna, satisfy your down payment, and then the additional fees you're gonna have. That's always something that I talk about, like, you have earnest money, you need an inspection. These are all the things like start saving now. Maybe don't go out and eat and have Starbucks if
And
you're
you go over
tight.
that during buyer consult.
I go over it super basic. I just like to touch
Right.
base on that stuff and just say, hey, like, what do you know about it? Right? And if they, and they'll kind of start naming some things off, and then I'm just like, okay, well, where are you guys at as far as pre? It's like, if you go to pre, well, how much have they told you about the process? Do you know how much cash you're gonna need to close? Do you guys have a down payment you're putting down? You know, or do you need to do a first time home buyer? It's perfectly fine if you can. There's gonna be some other things that are gonna have to come out of pocket. You guys know what earnest money is. Then I go over a little spiel on that, and then you may have some additional fees. You may have to cover appraisal cost. You might have to cover inspection if you guys choose to do that. Here's some ranges. And I've got a little email, like if I schedule an appointment with somebody for a buyer, I've got an email too that kind of just talks about the home buying process that's like super simple, just to kind of give them a run through it, right? And then when I'm going through it again, if they have something that's like sticking out, they'll be like, oh, I wanted to ask you about that. Or, and then as we go through the process, I tell them, like, we'll go in more detail as we go along. Like, I'm gonna guide you through the process. We'll make sure that you guys are all know in advance, and I'll give you enough good, you know, communication so you're not blindsided. But having those conversations up front is huge, because if you guys get someone under contract and then you're talking about earnest money, and then you're talking about a $500 inspection, and then like, sometimes those alone can kill the deal. They might be strapped for cash, like they just people that live paycheck to paycheck, right? And sometimes that can just kill the deal.
I've got times too where we've started looking, they're approved, they're ready to roll, they've got a significant down payment. And then we start looking and they're like, crap, you know what, we just thought of, we didn't think we'd find something so fast. I had someone that was putting, because for a long time, like the 30-day CDs at America First had great rates on them. So just this last year, I had a client that had put their entire down payment into a 90-day CD because they were just like, oh, well, we're gonna start looking, but it's gonna be a while. Well, they found something and it's like, well, do you think they'll close in 90 days? I'm like, no, this is a hot property. They're gonna want to close now. So then it was refiguring, does that make sense? How is it worth it trying to pull it out? Can they get the money somewhere else, right? But if we hadn't had that conversation, which I didn't, because I didn't think about it, right? So then I'm going, okay, well, timeline wise, and they're like, oh, well, our money's in a CD for 90 days. Okay, well, then we're not looking today,
Right.
right? Because if
That's
you
a
find
great
something
scenario.
today,
Yeah,
It's a great scenario to have 90 days, because most of them are 6 months or more.
right? And it was like a weird thing because it was just a short-term one that American First was doing. And they actually called me about, I think they called all their clients. They were like, hey, this is a great rate. If you have money just sitting in savings, stick it into a CD for 90 days if you're not doing anything with it. Like I did it with all my kids stuff too, because they have money in their accounts. But yeah, most of the time it is 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, but most of the time the CDs are
yeah,
longer.
and it's not fluid at all.
Yeah.
You mentioned appraisal. When does that come into or am I jumping ahead? Cause I'm just wondering how appraisal versus home inspection.
So we'll do a home inspection. So when you go under contract, this is gonna be your first section is your seller's disclosures, right? That we were kind of talking about. And I don't know if there's another slide that's gonna go over those timelines or not. We can jump into them.
You can call for the
Um,
lending. They'll take care of it. It's the inspection, the appraisal, don't go hand in.
Yeah, they're
They
different.
should, they could, but they
It seems
don't.
like they should, okay.
Right,
They don't, and then the other thing too, like a lot of people, like I've had buyers think like, oh, well, I have to get an FHA appraisal, so that's an inspection. It's not an inspection. There's very specific things that FHA appraisers are looking for. They're very separate. I always like to do my inspection first. Because I don't want my client to pay for an appraisal if there's a big deal breaker in the inspection.
Gotcha, that makes.
And I also don't want to sit under contract with my buyer, like, I like them to do the inspection within a week of going under contract, because I don't want to sit under contract, like 2 to 3 days if we can. I don't want to sit under contract with the buyer if there's something major that's gonna be a deal killer for them. I want to know right away so we can cancel the deal and move on. And I don't want the lender to keep moving forward, the title to keep moving forward. I certainly don't want them to pay for an appraisal if possible. So I always like to do the inspection first.
So your seller's disclosures, like she was saying, when you do the contract, you typically do 5 to 7 days. Sometimes you can do even a little shorter than that. Most of the time, your listing agent's gonna have all of this stuff already. Like, this is their title report that they've done, the plat map. If there's CC&Rs, so like covenants and restrictions on the property. If there's HOA, the HOA docs, these are things that your listing agent should already have prior to like listing the home.
Technically, though, they should send you an updated PR with your buyer on it.
I knew.
And so that's why, like, technically, they should send this updated with your buyer on it. So even if they have one, like, if I don't have it in time, I'll send them the preliminary report I got. But that's why I give it a little bit.
One with the
Mhm.
So This gives them the time, and it's all listed out in your contract in that section that just tells them if any of these are applicable, these need to be sent to the buyer to be reviewed by the state. So that's gonna be your first deadline on the contract. Your next is gonna be your due diligence period. What do you guys think your timeline should be on that for due diligence?
So it depends on those variables of what am I appraising, if I need an appraisal, if I need to take out money of a CD, if I, like, how is the deal gonna get going? What's the flow of the deal in the overall picture? So that I can have a clear due diligence. If it's an FHA, then what areas are on my control or not? That's what I'm.
Okay, and you do have your finance and appraisal, so that's gonna give you a little bit more time for some of that stuff. Are you one of the backwards people? You go backwards?
I do.
And why do you go backwards? Because you wanna know your settlement date first?
So
When do you wanna close on the house?
Yeah, so I kind of work backwards from, and we cover this in detail in the contracts class, so we're not gonna go deep into like all the reasons why. But I start with my settlement date in mind, because if I know that we wanna close, if I'm writing a contract today and I've talked to the lender and I know that they could close it in 3 weeks, and that timeline also works for the seller. So I know that we're 3 to 4 weeks out. But again, you gotta check with your lender, because just like you were just saying, where's the money coming from? How long is the appraisal gonna take? How long does the lender take? Sometimes they're like working in a rapid race for into this. There's just all these other factors. So don't just assume that your lender can do it in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I would call them and say, hey, I'm writing a contract for Wade today. It's October 10th. Can we close on November 10th or whatever day? And if they say yes, then that's when I'm gonna write it. And then I like to work backwards from there. So if this is like 4 weeks out, then I'm gonna do my finance and appraisal at like 3 weeks out. And also, I like to keep these pretty close together, because if I'm representing the buyer, I want these to be pretty close. If I'm representing the seller, I'm like, you don't need 3 weeks for finance and appraisal. We're gonna tighten that up, right? But it depends on this. In this case, we're talking about buyer timeline.
Yeah.
I want my buyers to have
As
this
much time
is
as possible.
as much time as possible to make sure that their loan is locked and loaded, right? So my due diligence, in this case, I would do about 10 to 14 days if I was going with a 3 to 4 week closing. Now, again, same thing on this. If somebody gives me a 2 week due diligence, I'm gonna be like, wait, you don't need 2 weeks for due diligence. You need 1, right? But keep in mind with due diligence, it depends. Are they gonna do a meth test? Because if you're not gonna rush it, you've got 5 days. in
Are they gonna
return
do
time.
radon?
Are they gonna do radon? Because you've got 24 hours of the radon, or 48 hours of the radon machine sitting in someone's house before the inspector can go back and read it. Right? So you've got to think through all those pieces. How quick can your inspector get you in? Do you have an inspector that can get you in same week? Or is your inspector 9 days out, right? So knowing those things when you're putting it into the due diligence, I don't ever want to do a timeline that I can't meet.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure, and that's why the other reason that I say like right away, as soon as we're under contract, I'm like, lender, title, you've got the contract, let's schedule an inspection. If I can get inspection same week, I want to, because that gives you a little bit of cushion too. If you have a 10-day due diligence and it takes the inspector 3 days to get in, and then they do radon, so that's 2 days, you're now like almost a week in before you can even start negotiating something. And the due diligence might be like, you need to have an inspector come in or an electrician come in and look at it. Or you've got to get a roofer to come look at the roof. Like Wade and I had a deal that we had to have that happen. Oh my gosh, I tell you, they don't have to. Did you see Jessica at the thing?
No.
Okay. I thought she, not like in a mean way, but I thought she'd just come say hi to you. She loved you. But anyway, but that gives you a little bit of a cushion. Now, again, you might have a listing agent that counters back with a shorter timeline. But if I'm the one writing the timelines, I want to make them reasonable, but make sure I'm protecting my client.
Yes. So those are like a brief rundown. It's typically what you're gonna see in most contracts, right? Due diligence, you're probably most people are gonna request 2 weeks, right? Again, it depends on what it is. If it's a cash transaction, you might do some things different, right? You may want to extend the due diligence a little bit and not have, because you're not gonna have a finance and appraisal, or you might want to tighten it up if they don't care about things.
If it's land deals, you're probably gonna need like 3 months.
So this just kind of goes over a little bit of timeline. Obviously, they're missing some of the things that we thought were important, like lenders. So your inspection, you're gonna get in touch with obviously the listing agent, right? Let them know when it's scheduled, make sure they can get out there to schedule it. Then your inspection is gonna happen. Basically, all your stuff's gonna come back, right? And then you're gonna have your inspection response. next the appraisals due, and then you've got kind of final walkthrough. There's some things that are kind of missing in this as far as what we do. I know that this is kind of super generic. It's like built for across the country, right? And they do different things in different states. One of the things that I would say is right, we're asking the biggest thing right here at the bottom, like, what are we doing at each step to bulletproof the transaction and to set your buyers up for a successful close? So one of the things that I would recommend doing 1,000,000,000% is prep them for your inspection report.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
number one bulletproofing you could do.
Because you're literally paying someone to go out to a house to look at anything possible that is not 100%.
Stuff.
If you go into a new build,
They're
you're gonna
gonna find
still
stuff.
have a 20-page report of things that are not 100%, if not more.
Yep.
So they need to know upfront, firsthand, probably even before you order the inspection.
Uh-huh. I tell them when we're at the house, like, oh, the inspector's gonna point this out. That's their job.
And you guys will
Right.
start noticing the things when you see them on the inspection, you're gonna be like, this will be on there, this will be on there, or you'll know like, hey, FHA might flag this, they may not, you never know, it depends on the appraiser you get. But the inspector's paid to fine tooth, check every little detail. So you're gonna get a page that comes back, or a report that comes back that's 90 pages long with 80 issues on there. If you don't prep your buyer to know that that's a normal thing that we see,
It's
we're
not a
literally
to-do
paying
list.
someone to go out there with a magnifying glass, right? You're not buying a brand new home. Tell them some of the things that you're gonna see, especially if you're doing a walkthrough and they love the house. Like, that's a great time. Like, hey, just so you guys know, when we do our inspection report, you're gonna see a ton of stuff. And I want you guys to kind of look around and know that like, these are things they're gonna point out. They may look worse in a photo
Yep.
than what they do in person. And it's gonna probably scare you a little bit. And I always tell them, hey, the biggest concerns for us is gonna be safety and structure. Those are the two main things that we're concerned about, right? So don't let it freak you out. We're gonna do whatever we can to protect you, make sure you guys get a great house. We're not gonna buy a house if the roof's falling in, right? But look at the house right now. We're gonna make an offer based off of the condition the house is in. We're not gonna come back and nitpick because there's things in the paint, then
Yep.
there's a scuff on the wall, and there's the dishwasher doesn't work, because I told you, like, we can factor that into the price of our offer, and I always tell that when we're writing an offer.
Yep.
Let's make the offer based off of the condition that we know about, right? And then we can negotiate repairs based off the inspection. But let's not do both, because
Yep.
if you know things are not working, even if it wasn't disclosed and you find things that you know that they may come back, don't factor that into your price. Like, you can factor it into your price, but don't let that be your negotiation with the other agent. We came in low because of this, and this, and this. Because then when you go back and you say, hey, we want 10K for a roof, and you're like, well, that's why you told us you came in 15K under, was because the roof was bad and this and this and this. So no, we're not gonna help you out.
I always prep them in advance too, to know like the inspector's job is to find. And it's really not to find, some of them will be big issues, some of them are just maintenance. You're gonna be a homeowner, especially for first-time home buyers. You're buying a house, and that means you own it, and house comes with maintenance. So there's gonna be things on there like you should have your furnace serviced. You should have someone come and blow out air ducts if it hasn't been done, that kind of stuff. And some of those are gonna be your like honey-do list over the next year. Some of them you're not gonna care about, and some of them you're gonna be like, this is a very big concern for me. And the very big concerns are the ones we're gonna worry about. I'm not gonna worry about the little things, because if we worry about the little things, and if you send me a list and I'm the listing agent on the other side, and I will do this, if I'm a listing agent and you send me a list of 20 things, I'm gonna say to you, what are your top 3 most important? Because I'm gonna talk to the seller, but the seller's not gonna do 20 little things. Or even worse, I'm just gonna go through them and I'm gonna be like, oh, we will correct that GFCI. Yep, we'll do that one. Touch up paint around the door. We'll do it. I'm gonna find the smallest things, and the seller's gonna agree to do 3 or 4 tiny things, when really, if there's like 1 or 2 big things that your buyer has an issue with, go for those. Forget about all the other things and use the other little things as leverage of like, hey, this report was like 80 pages long. I've talked to my buyer. We've thrown out basically all the little tiny things, and now we're only focused, like, these are things that are very concerning to them, right? Because that's a negotiation that's happening. And if you just come in with a list this long, I think a lot of people think, well, if I just come in with a list that's forever long, it's gonna be easy. That's worse. Because now I'm just like, you just put everything on the inspection report. We're not gonna do everything. You saw the house, you knew that there was such a fee, you know?
So if you have a question about what's on that report, as far as like, is it a big concern? Should it be a big worry or not? Who do you talk to? The inspector?
The inspector. So make sure you're working with good inspectors, and it's important too, to work with inspectors that know how to talk to your clients as well.
Gotcha.
Because anything can, like, in my opinion, anything can be fixed. It's just what does make sense and what doesn't.
And
So
how is
you-
that information delivered?
And how is the information delivered, right? So if you have questions, ask the inspector, and remember too, and I always prep myself, my buyers for this too. The inspector's gonna look, they're gonna do an overall look, they're gonna look at everything. But they're not an electrician, they're not a plumber, they're not a roofer. So they may flag the roof and tell you that the roof looks like it's at the end of its life. And it's gonna say in every single inspection report, we suggest you contact a roofing contractor in order to give you an actual roof life.
A license.
A licensed
And
contractor.
a lot of them have a general drop down too. And it could be one of those things, but the little drop down that they have to fill in says, it could have this, or this.
Yep. And so just make sure that's when I say that's like, if you have a question about the roof, for example, I would say, hey, you're gonna talk to the inspector and say, did you see any leaks, like blah, 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 you can talk through it. And then this is why you have a little extra time in your due diligence, because you did your inspection really early, because now you have time to get a roofer out to look at it.
Let's get a roofer out.
Hey,
that
if you're
really knows what
working
we're
on
doing.
electrical, let's get an electrician out to take a peek at it, right? Because they're gonna take off the box, they're gonna tell you there's things are double tapped.
Or if they need to get an estimate to say, how, well, is it gonna cost me a lot, or am I, am I gonna be able to cover it, or?
Or is this something that we need to ask? And that's even helpful if you are asking, even if you are asking the seller for the repair, it's helpful if you kind of know what it's gonna cost, right? If you're like, hey, they want an electrician to come out and look at it, to give them an idea. And you'll start working with people too, like, a lot of times you can send them a picture and they'll tell you like at least an estimate of what they think it'll cost.
Yeah.
But
So-
the more you can do to prepare them, you're gonna say, that's the number one bulletproof right there.
Because if you don't prep it and don't have those conversations, and especially if they don't come to the walkthrough. And then they just are blasted with this report, they're just like, oh, I'm not buying this house, there's too many problems with it, right? So, and again, you don't want an inspector that's going, this is crazy, this is junk, and this is like, and I've
And
had
there
it.
are inspectors
had it.
that are, I'm like.
When they're like,
are
no,
you
we got a
seriously
guy.
But I think there's also inspectors on the other side of it, like their job is to give you information, but they should be able to deliver the information in a non-scary, informative way.
Yeah.
Right, like there's two different ways you can say, this is an old heater, or furnace, you can go, oh my gosh, this furnace is original with the house, it's 50 years old. Average life is 20 years, I'm surprised this thing turned on. Right, that's one way you could deliver it. Or it's probably leaking carbon monoxide right now, like you can deliver it that way, or they can say, man, this is a great brand of furnace. And it's been kicking for 60 years, that's a long time. I'd start budgeting for a replacement, because average life
Or I would
expectancy
recommend
is
a
20 years.
servicing
Or
on it and get
recommend
a
it be
professional
serviced.
opinion on whether or not it needs repairs, yeah.
Yeah.
So these are just talking about some of the common interaction points, so obviously communications of deadlines, that should be happening before you even send the contract, right? Make sure they understand all of those and what the importance of each one is. Communication of contract to all the parties such as title and lending, right? So that's like Russ said, first thing, get them off. Lender and buyer communication, right? Make sure that they're all on the same page. Communication of a list of recommended title companies, inspectors, insurance agents, etc. You guys will build these as you go, and you'll change them as you go along as
Yep.
well. Like, you might have somebody who does something phenomenal one time who was, referred by somebody else, and you're like, okay, they're going in my list. And you may have somebody who does something that you don't love one
And then
time.
they're off my list.
Yep.
You
So-
do one deal for me and you're no longer my person.
You're gonna have scheduling and communication with inspectors and listing agents, sending amendments or inspection reports to the other side, title and lending. I was gonna say, it's more on the listing side, we'll go into that too, we always ramble for too long when you get me and Rusty together.
We're gonna roll through these next
So
week
additional
so
questions to
fast.
ask yourself, when am I reminding the buyers to?
Not make.
To
what that
make
says.
big purchases. Don't remind them to make big purchases. Yes, have this conversation too. And your lender should be having this conversation with them,
Oh my god.
but like,
I like with the fear of God in them.
my
I
clients the other day, I sat down with them already, and like, we just went under contract, and we're talking about earnest money, and then we're talking about getting their, cash to close, and it's through a 401k, right? So like the timelines, and we gotta get stuff, and it's short, so I'm like, if we come in with this offer, it's a little higher than wanted, like, you're gonna end up with, X amount, you're gonna come out of pocket, how are we gonna get there? And oh, I was just gonna go to the bank and get a loan. No, you are not.
No.
No, 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 no.
No, you're not getting what you don't need. It's not gonna work.
There's people that even went and like opened up a credit card just to open it up because they were gonna buy flooring
And it's killing you.
they don't close.
I literally scare them. I say, if they're getting a loan, I'm like, okay, here's what I need you to do. Anything more than what you would buy at a gas station. So less, anything, that's more than $100. You're getting gas and snacks.
Call your lender. before
You need
do
to
it.
call your lender. Don't get pre-approved. Don't go to RC Willie and start shopping. You can go make a list. Don't ask them to open credit. Don't ask them to run credit. Don't buy a new car. Don't go refinance your other car unless
You
you
had
yourself
somebody
to
that
do
went
it.
to RC Willie's or something.
I had somebody that went to RC Willie and has charged furniture. I had someone that went to Lowe's 2 days before closing and they said they hadn't even, they were like, well, I didn't even buy they told me that it wouldn't matter because they weren't gonna charge until it went on
Delivery.
into install date. Hey, but they opened their credit card in your name and our margins were so tight, you guys. I had someone that quit their job. And didn't bother to tell
And didn't
me.
tell you.
Didn't know that we would do a final verification of employment. And so, my lender, her name is Robin Stark. She's retired. She was amazing.
Oh, I love her.
I love her so much. Oh, you know Robin. Robin calls me. She goes, "Hey, Russ, what you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing. What are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, have you talked to Wade?" We'll use Wade's name. Have you talked to Wade lately? And I go, "Yeah, pretty much every day. What's up?" Did he happen to mention he quit his job that way 2 weeks ago almost? I said, "No, he sure didn't." He did not mention that. She goes,
Is this the same way we're talking about?
She goes, "Yeah, he did. We called to do the final VOE today and they let us know that he has not worked there for almost 2 weeks." And I was like, "Cool."
Wow.
He figured he was approved. It wasn't gonna matter. Now, by the way, he had gotten another job about a week later, but guess what? It was an FHA loan. How many months or how many pay stubs do we need for FHA loan? Gotta have at least the last 30 days. And he stayed in the same line of work, luckily. By some miracle, I was able to pull that off, but also it was way more of a buyer's market at the time. And I was like, so anyway, could they still move in and we'll rent it from you for a month while we wait for the check stubs? It was all gonna work, but like I tell them, I'm like, don't make any financial decisions. And even just 2 weeks ago, I had a buyer consultation with a client and they were sitting there talking and I went through this again. And his aunt's even a lender that's working with them. So I know she's giving them a lot of information. And I'm like, hey, remember, don't do anything financially. Don't buy a car, don't quit your job, don't change jobs, don't open a credit card, don't go to Lowe's, don't go to RC Willie. And I'm like rolling through the things and she's like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, oh, and I said, were you planning to do one of these things? And she just said, well, I'm actually am looking for other jobs. Like I've been applying for all these other jobs. And I said, you need to talk to your lender first. Sometimes if you're staying in the same like line of work, it's okay. But also they were like right on the brink of making too much to go FHA versus conventional. So I'm like, that's something you got to keep in mind. If you make more money, you would think that'd be a great thing, right? But that meant a different type of loan for them. So just having those conversations to make sure they know that is really important.
And she mentioned something too, like in that whole transaction, like most people would have been like, oh my God, you quit your job, like. Just so you guys know, if you guys ever get into a pickle with something, before you let a contract die and a deal fall apart, call one of the people in the office,
Guys,
if it's Sean,
specialist.
if it's like Rusty, like whoever you need, call, like, people sometimes don't think of that, like, oh, we could
Yeah.
maybe rent it for them for 30 days, and like,
This
there's a lot of things that you can do that are outside the box that you just, especially when you're frazzled and in a panic, and you're like, my buyer's gonna lose their earnest money, and they're gonna have a place to live, and I'm not gonna get paid, and
this even sometimes means like I've changed lenders midstream before because this lender could do something this lender couldn't. Anytime you're in that kind of a situation, seriously call someone that will walk it through with you. And I always laugh. I'm like,
and if they don't
man,
give you
I
option
never
out,
call time of death.
call
Like
someone else.
this bitch is dead for a while before I call time of death. Cause I am like, I can bring anything back to life. So seriously, like call somebody, like I am the queen of figuring out if there's a way, by damn, we're gonna find it. And so all of those things like you may not think of in the moment. And really that one did, it worked out okay. They had already moved out. They didn't want it to go back on the market, all this crap. They just needed at least their mortgage covered. So we were able to go, let's do a lease for 30 days. We know this is the exact date he can close. We've already verified with the new employer. All of that's the same. And we were able to get it done. And someone else that was more frazzled or didn't think it through might have just said, we got to cancel. Because at that moment, he did not qualify for the loan. And if they weren't able to speak to and find a solution, And sometimes we call the other party too quickly. Also, by the way, don't do that. If we're talking about keeping contract to close, have some solutions before you call with a problem. And if that means you're calling other people to get solutions, great, do it.
And
But
that's the
work it
same with
through.
your buyer, not just the listing agent, it's with
Uh-huh.
both
Yep.
ends.
Yep.
So that can be a deal killer yourself, you can be the deal killer.
Yep.
When you overreact to problems, to your clients, can be a huge thing, you have to take all of the emotion out of it.
Yep.
Cause it's not your emotion, right? You're not in that process. It's
When we
them.
talk about the list of people that you work with too, I have a lender that is a really good friend of mine and he and I worked together for a couple years. But I realized he needed to be the hero, and so everything would escalate really high, and then he would solve the problem, and then would escalate high, and it was just his personality. It actually wasn't like, I don't think he was like, I'm gonna be the hero in this situation. That was his personality, like his hair was on fire, he was like, oh, what's going on? And they'd be like,
Oh,
what
but
a
I
solution.
think-
Like, oh, like 2 minutes later, right? And it was stressful for my clients, and I was like, I can't operate like that, and then it was constantly because of the constant up and down like that, it was like, we just need a little extension because of this big problem. It's a big, huge problem, but we just need a little extension. And I was just like, you're not closing on time and you're putting, like, your hair is on fire and I need you to be solution oriented. So many of these things you never even need to tell my buyer about. You just could have solved them behind the scenes. They didn't even need to know there was a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was a reflection of me and who I was working with. And so I had to stop working with that person because I was like, I don't operate that way. I want you to find the solution. And if you want to tell us about the problem later, great. Let's laugh about it after closing.
Right?
Let's not have
That's
our
much
hair
better
on fire.
experience for your clients anyways. Little did you know,
No, whoa, we went through a lot behind the scenes, but I'm
Like-
so glad we're here.
we're lucky we made it past the finish line. Here's the thing, that
Right.
happened, but we took care of it, and got it, so that you didn't have to stress about it, right? So when am I communicating when to set up utilities and how? That's a big one people forget. And then they're like, what? You didn't tell me. Now I have a reconnection fee and I'm here with no gas. And it's gonna be 3 days for my gas to be turned back on.
Yep, or water. Ooh, they're gonna be so pissed if they try to move in on Saturday morning and they have no water because they forgot to go to the city on Friday.
And utilities need to be on for home inspections, just so you guys know, so.
Yep.
Any holidays, right, that might delay the process, that's a big one. Look at your dates, make sure you're paying attention to your calendars.
And if they're out of town, I always ask people, hey, if we're gonna close on this day, are you in town? Because they gotta be here to sign if you're working with the buyer.
Yep. How do I negotiate the inspection report and when am I communicating this information? Again, we talked about that. And then when do I touch base with the lender, title company and. Documentation.
Hmm.
So, again, these are some things to ask, right? So is this an active communication or a document? So some things, right, can be just a communication versus needing to be addressed in documentation, right?
What are some examples of those?
Inspection would be a great one. If you're gonna ask for a ton of things on an inspection report or your, whatever it is, don't put it into a document first, an addendum first, and send it through because now it's attached through the whole transaction. Everyone's gonna view it. Your lenders might not love to see that you asked for 15 things to be repaired and then only 2 of them got negotiated. They may want those 15 things resolved before they're gonna fund on the loan.
Yep.
So that can kill your deal just because you didn't call the agent and have a conversation with them and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. I'm gonna send it over to you in an email, review it with your buyer, let us know what's up, what they're willing to do, and then we'll send
And then
through an
we'll-
official communication and lock it in. So that's a big one, I think.
Huge. And on the other side of that, don't just verbally agree to something unless you're prepared to do it yourself. Because if it's not in writing, the seller's not obligated to do it, and sometimes they have really good intentions. And so they do say, oh yeah, you know what, that's no problem, I'll take care of that plumbing issue. And you go, okay, yeah, they're gonna take care of it, let's not put it in on them, and it's not that big of a deal. If that doesn't get taken care of, you literally have no recourse, because you have nothing in writing. So.
So to whom, I don't know if that's like accurate English,
To
to whom
whom
and from
from
whom is the document going? From whom is the document going? So who are you sending it to, right? Is it going to all the parties that it needs to go to?
I have a good example of this. To and from whom? I had a client who thought that she had to send the contract, so she was writing an offer for a buyer. And she was she was frustrated because she felt like she needed the seller's email because she thought she was supposed to send it in DocuSign to the seller as well. At the same time as buyer. I had never like that. I hadn't come across that. And then I was like, oh, I guess that would make sense if you hadn't been through it before. She just thought, well, because actually she might have been, I don't remember, but it was showing like places you could put the sellers, in DocuSign.
So when it pre-fills,
So when
it throws in
pre-fills it,
seller
was
stuff.
doing the seller Stuff too, and she's like, I don't even have the seller's contact information, and the agent hasn't called me back yet with it. I was like, no, don't ever communicate directly with their client unless you have permission to do so. So you should never send someone else's client anything unless you have permission to do so, and that's pretty rare. Like, there's been a few times where like an agent's like, I'm gonna be out of town. Will you send that when it's completed to the seller or whatever? But it's pretty rare that you're ever communicating directly with the other party's client.
Yeah.
Very few circumstances that would ever happen.
And it's always good to just like give them a heads up if there is, like when me and Rusty closed the deal, she's like, hey, my gal, she's super interested, but she's coming to your open house. She's gonna
Yeah.
be there, just so you know, like. Have that conversation, right? Cause you just don't want to risk
Yeah.
a conversation that shouldn't happen between those two parties.
Mhm.
So,
Online, can you guys still, I can't tell if this is still coming through sound wise. See,
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Dang it. Okay.
Hello?
If-
We
Okay, I
can
can
hear
hear
you
you
again.
now. If
Okay.
you are trying to say something at some point and we don't hear you,
click the raise your hand thing or
yeah,
something.
and then we'll see if it-
I don't think that shows up. But yeah, I'll text you again, Rusty. If,
Thanks. Yeah, or just that raise your hand, cause yeah, it doesn't, I can't see it. See, there we go.
Did it work?
Good job.
it shows up. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how you put your hand down, though. I've done that before. And I'm like, it's. I like put my hand down.
There's actually a button that says lower hand.
See,
Oh, there you go.
you lower your hand, babe.
Oh.
Okay,
What is the best topic for communication, sending documents to a responsible party? Just call and ask. It's that easy. When you call and have the conversation with the agent, ask them. People hate it when you send it through .loop or DocuSign, and sometimes it makes things funky. They don't prefer that system. Like, just call and ask them, how do you want me to send the documents through? You want PDF? You want an email? You want DocuSign? What's easiest for you?
sign, so I love that Carrie does this for me and she's my TC, but if I have like an addendum or something that the other party's waiting for, I'll tell her, hey, just put there on there so that it goes to the listing agent as soon as my client completes it. Like if they sent us an addendum, it's waiting on my client to complete it, then it sends her, but it sends her a copy with a PDF. DocuSign automatically sends a PDF. So that's nice, instead of going into the,
I wish it would do that when you share the document, like if you go to share it, then it's just like they shared it. So what is the plan for follow-up? After document has been sent to the responsible party,
quick text. Want to check the picture, got that, and then I just sent it over. Thanks.
received, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
So, and just, if you guys are sending stuff out too, if you've got a lot going on, like if you need to put an alert in your phone or, like, that's the last thing you want to do is let something lapse because you weren't paying attention to it. Like that's a swift kick in your behind, right?
Especially your deadlines, like make sure like, and whoever, like whether you do it yourself or use a transaction coordinator, I have them add calendar invites into my calendar. So then I get like, if I open it right now, it will say like such and such due diligence deadline. And then that's on my calendar because I live and die by my calendar. So then I know it's there and I see it and I know it's.
I'll even go in sometimes and put in like 2 days in front of those of like, hey, is everything good for this?
Yep.
Cause I'm like, the last thing you wanna do is, oh, I've got 2 hours to figure this out and get documents and agreements and. So, are the templates for this that I can use or create to save an effort and streamline communications across transactions? So anything you guys are doing, I did this forever and ever and ever. I always like, I need to just make templates and then I'm like in there to type my email. I just need to make a freaking template for this. And then like the next time I'm in there typing, I'm like, do whatever you guys can to make it super easy, right? Get you guys a little spreadsheet or something and save your little email templates, whatever you guys need to do so that you can just copy paste, change the detailed information you need, make your life easier. Or you can get you a transaction coordinator will help with that. So we talked about the buyer's timeline. Who's involved in the transaction? So
To work through as a small group, we just work through this all together. Right?
yep. Didn't we already go over all this?
I think we
Oh,
went
this is
through
sellers.
sellers.
That's why. So this is just flipping it to the seller side. First thing that the seller needs, you know, what do the sellers need to know and do? What do I need to know and do? What does the rest of the team need to take action on and when? What am I doing at each point to pull with the transaction forward? So your seller timeline, it's got on here, marked listing as pending in the MLS, which. Oh, I guess you'd go pending. This is like contract. I'm like thinking from the
Yeah,
the
'cause my
beginning.
contract's closed.
So, you can go in there, you obviously wanna, once you get an executed contract back that's signed and you got acceptance. You go in there and update your, MLS. I don't know if you guys will have access right off the bat. You might have to have them change it. I think when you first get access, you won't be able to change the status. So you guys will have to have them change that for you, but, you'll wanna go in there and change it to either backup or under contract or active time clause, depending on the situation. Then obviously the buyer's agent's gonna call you and say, hey, they're gonna do an inspection, right? This is when they wanna do it. Does that work for you? They're gonna do the inspection. The listing agent here, and it's different in other states, the listing agent here is just gonna be in charge of scheduling that with their client and say, hey, does that work, right? And communicating, they wanna do it this, does that work for you guys? They're gonna come do the inspection, preferably you want your sellers to leave the home
Yes.
during that time. They can be there sometimes at the beginning, but they should always be gone when the buyers are gonna do their final walkthrough. It's preferred that nobody's there because you don't want them to tie up your inspector either, right? Give them the freedom to do. Same thing with your buyers. You don't want them there during the inspection, let them come to the walkthrough.
I always make sure I just set an expectation with my seller. Hey, just so you know, because sometimes sellers don't realize, like, I've had sellers before that were like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the appraiser was gonna take photos. And now there's a photo of my messy kitchen in the appraisal report. Because they saw the appraisal for some reason. I think it was a low appraisal and I sent it to them or something. Anyway, but just keep that, I always tell them, like, from the time we go under contract, I'm prepping the seller to say, here's the time someone else is gonna be back in the house. Because the other thing is they go under contract and what's the first thing? They're like, okay, I'm gonna pack everything and be ready to move. So I'm always like, here's what you're gonna start with. Your storage rooms, your garage, then you're gonna go to closets, like, start packing the stuff no matter what, but like, leave your photos on the wall for now, leave it staged, like, leave it like a showing, because something could still happen. And let them know what the inspector's gonna be doing and tell them, you need to be gone, just like you are for an, showing. Have the house ready like it is for a showing, know that the appraisers, that the inspector's gonna be here. The buyers, likely the buyer's agent are gonna be coming back through the house. They're gonna be measuring, they're gonna be doing things like that. The appraiser's gonna come, have it like a showing for the appraiser. Appraisers are also swayed by condition, guys, like, it's not just only their comps. They're still looking at it saying, is this home in as good as condition as the comps, less than or better than, right? So I always let them know, like, plan that those are just showings, have them showing ready for those three things. But if you don't tell your seller that, and then the inspector gets there, and the inspector's gonna be fine with them being there, but they're asking like, oh, what are you doing in the room? Did you find anything? What did that look like? I had one time where I had the buyer, the seller refused to leave until we got there for the walkthrough, then he left. And then the funny thing is, we're doing our walkthrough, Corey Waywent was my inspector, we go downstairs and he goes, oh, that's funny. And I said, what? And he goes, this outlet was off, like, it didn't even have an outlet. There was a basement that was unfinished. They had unwired, just live wires hanging there, but he had been following them around. Like, what are you writing down? What are you doing? And he had gone back upstairs or gone on the roof or done something. And when we went to go do our walkthrough, he had like wired up a plug and put the plates on it and stuff. So it's just weird, just like weird stuff. Like, just tell your seller to leave. They don't need to be there. It's just weird. I only use
bad
professionals,
as-
just don't be there.
Letting your buyer's parents come to the inspection box. You can avoid
You
it,
can't avoid it.
please. It's like,
Yeah.
that's a deal killer.
See, and I'm like, do you know what would be great? The inspector is gonna walk through with us for probably about 30 minutes. I'm gonna plan for 45. So if you're gonna get there at 2:30, why don't you tell your parents to come at 3? And then we've got about 15 minutes for them to walk through and see the house. I get it, you're excited about it, but let's do it
I'll
after the
even
inspection.
joke with them, like, dads are deal killers. They know, like, we're all know-it-alls, right? They wanna do what's best for you, but like, let's let the professional give you all the stuff, and then if you need to unwrap that with your dad, let's do it afterwards.
Yep.
A big thing for this, as far as deal killers too, prep your freaking sellers for the inspection also, the same as you would your buyers. Like, tell them to change their furnace.
I'm like, I would tell.
Tell them to change the light bulbs that are out. Like, there's so many little things that you can do to alleviate that list and make it so much smaller that are just the dumbest little things.
If I know it's an FHA loan and I notice that there's only one smoke detector like in the living room. I'm like, hey, every bedroom's gonna need smoke detectors. Let's eliminate them having to come back and do that later. So put the smoke detectors up.
Yeah.
Change the furnace filters. If you haven't run a sink or whatever for a while, do it so that you can see beforehand if there's any leaks or anything like
And those
that.
FHA appraisers are gonna have to come back, and it's typically $150 for them to come back, and sometimes you'll have buyers ask you to cover that fee because of things that they've had to come back, right? Like, they know that they're gonna have to cover that cost, so just do some small things, make it easy. But schedule appraiser. So you were talking about that, when does it happen? So typically when you go under contract, you've got your seller's disclosures, you're gonna have all that, you go over all that stuff with your clients, right? Make sure everything looks good. Your due diligence is when you guys do your inspection. You've found everything that you need to look into. They've checked the schools around them. If they need to check the sex offender registry to make sure they don't have any cycles living next door to them, like, that's their chance to do whatever they want for them to back out 100%, right? And just, they can walk in and they didn't know that the closet was painted pink and they don't want to buy it, they can back out. So that's your safest protection period, right? A lot of times your lender's not even gonna order your appraisal until you've passed your due diligence or you've agreed to repairs and have moved past that. They don't want to send out an appraisal to know that you guys are going back and forth about repairs again, and then there's a list or an addendum, 6 addendums, and these things don't, you just wasted your money on appraisal because now they're not gonna do anything because you didn't fix these conditions.
Yep.
So, appraisal, and then if you have a low appraisal response, you'll have to deal with that before closing, right? Kind of opens the door for renegotiating. And again, if you're bulk approving the transaction, talk to your folks about the potential of what that looks like, right? If it does come in low, what are the actions we're gonna take? Are you gonna be able to come in lower? Are we like, what does that look like to them? Right? Make sure you know their scenario before it happens. That way you've already got a game plan.
This is a good conversation too, even when you're talking about pricing, like your pricing strategy and why you're pricing it where it is. Like you and I were just talking about that with one of your listings that you had. Because the reality is like, and I'll say this sometimes, like, look, guys, we can price the house wherever we want. The market's gonna tell us what the house is gonna sell for, and the market's gonna tell the appraiser what the house should sell for. And if an appraiser comes in and tries to appraise it, and we have it listed at 900 and all my comps are 8, I'm not gonna be able to justify the appraisal. But if we have it listed at 800 and all our comps are at 8 and our appraisal comes in at 750, I've got comps all day long to be able to justify our price, that I could talk to that appraiser and make sure that we can get that done. But if I don't have any comps to justify the higher price, it's gonna be really hard. We're gonna have a we're gonna have a problem. So even if we go under contract here, unless the buyer has the difference to pay for the appraisal, the difference, then you're gonna have to make it up. They're gonna have to make it up, or it's gonna be a deal killer. We're gonna be dead in the water if they can't get the appraisal work.
And these are things you'd have conversations with too, even if your buyers are coming in and they're asking for closing costs and you counter back, we're not giving you 20K in closing costs, and then they come back with 20K over list so that they can finance it, right? That's great. It looks beautiful on paper, but what's gonna happen when it doesn't appraise? Are you gonna be comfortable taking the 20K hit later on? Because that's what's gonna happen, right? So,
It's just
Well,
good preparation.
Question, and I know I'm working with Sean on this, but this has been a rough one for me where I'm the listing agent, and the offer that we received, we accepted, was a conventional loan.
Okay,
We don't find out until today, so it's like 2 weeks later,
they're swapping.
they flipped to a FHA. But they, I think, already flipped to an FHA because they had a first appraisal. And so they were calling me for a settlement because it's a flip home. So they wanted to find out what the purchase price was of the home. Because they had to have that, otherwise they'd have to order a second FHA appraisal. So it just brought up I said, well, why are we talking FHA? I said, this actually was a conventional loan, so I don't even understand.
Now they flipped.
And they flipped it, but the problem is, my seller's been looking for any way to get out of the contract because they had a cash offer that would net them $20,000 more.
And this might just be it. But your seller can't cancel.
Right, the seller
buyer
cancels,
has to.
right, so.
they got it in Russ losing earnest money.
But here's the thing though, the contract's conventional.
You don't have to agree to the FHA, you don't have to agree to an FHA addendum.
You
So
don't.
they have to send you an FHA addendum, but here's the challenge. And
How
we're in,
how come you don't
wrap-
have to? Cause you have to.
the
when you
seller
put
doesn't
it in.
have to accept it. I don't have to.
Right,
You
but
don't have
I'm,
to accept
but
it.
I'm just saying, so.
Well,
the-
so when you look at the contract, when you fill out your terms with that, as long as you didn't like lie and say, I don't need financing. Your terms of your financing, you can change it to whatever they want to. They
But a
wouldn't
seller
even
is
know.
Accept
Yeah.
in terms of FHA addendum.
So if
Right,
they,
so I'm
so if they would
saying,
need to
so-
send you over an FHA addendum if they switch to FHA addendum, and your seller could,
Reject that. If
Yeah,
they wanted to.
But what they sent me wasn't, it's just so confusing because their deadline was up today at 5.
Then their earnest
But-
money is in jeopardy either way.
So they sent me, like, it just was like an FHA addendum, but it's almost as if it's dated like the date of the original contract. It's not saying, hey, buyer
Well-
is changing.
No,
And
so,
they
so the,
So.
really quick,
Sorry,
because
this
we're
is
on,
a
we're on a little
different
route.
part.
Really quick, the date, every single, so the date you write the offer, if you write an offer today, October 10th. And 3 weeks from now, you change financing and you send over an FHA addendum, it still is gonna say October 10th, because that's a reference date now.
Yeah.
Everything's referenced back to the date the contract was written. It should be signed the day that they signed it. And if they signed it before finance and appraisal, it depends on if your seller accepted it or if they didn't. They can change to a different financing term for sure, right? But
Okay.
what your seller doesn't have to agree to, let's say that they now did an FHA appraisal and the roof is bad. And now they want the seller to replace the roof. Well, they don't have to because they never agreed to any FHA repairs. But the buyer, if you agreed to an FHA addendum, the buyer can cancel because that's a financing term. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like there's this, it's kind of like the seller can't cancel. Because
But
if
they
the
can-
seller cancels, then they're technically
Right,
in default, but they can refuse to do FHA repairs because that wasn't originally agreed upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
unless
and
it's
I guess
put in
I'll
the
have to
FHA
talk to you
addendum.
after, because I don't know, so what document, so.
It
what
should have been, they
docs?
should have sent you an FHA addendum. But I'm guessing maybe what they sent you is an FHA amendatory clause, which is from the lender saying that you're gonna accept the terms of that loan. So let's look at it after, because we got.
Yeah, no, sorry.
And then we're like, we haven't even finished.
A really quick question. Just a one word answer. So are we looking at in a transaction, we have a buyer and a seller, are they each getting their own inspection and their own appraisal?
No.
No,
They
only
use
the buyer.
one body that's covering both of those positions for
They
the whole
only-
transaction.
We're just looking at it from two different angles, as far as communication.
keep in mind, this, your seller almost never sees an inspection report and almost never will see the appraisal. Almost never.
And that's what I was gonna say, the listing agent wouldn't
Listing-
usually see it either. Sometimes they can get it.
Sometimes you can see it. The appraisal comes in low, that's when you have to show the appraisal, but otherwise, I never show the appraisal, because guess what? I'm hoping I negotiated a good deal, and my appraisal came in higher than even where we're under contract. Well, why am I gonna tell the listing agent and the seller that? Now they're like, we left money on this
We're
table.
just marking.
So they
out
always
on
will ask me,
one and
oh, what the
other
appraisal
is
came in, I'm like, we're good.
And just like the communication.
Contract price, that's what I say, we're good at our contract price. I don't ever send them a copy of it, and then same thing with inspection, even if I'm asking for repairs, I take snippets of the screenshot of just those portions that I need. Cause I don't want them to have my whole inspection report, my buyer paid for it, why am I gonna give that to them?
That's why I say
It
on
only
these,
serves you
It
and your
only-
client.
Exactly.
those look confusing because really the only communication that's happening here as a listing
It's just
agent
setting
is
it up.
Rusty's calling me and saying, we wanna do our inspection on this date, and I'm saying, are you guys available for the inspection this date? Boom.
Okay.
We're never gonna see that inspection report. We may
Gotcha.
see snippets of it, or she may send it all, the whole thing over to me. No. No, all one person. So, and then same thing with appraiser. I'm just gonna get notified as a listing agent when it's gonna be to make sure my clients are available for it and they're gonna get the stuff. They pay for that inspection report and that appraiser.
Yep.
It's up to them what they wanna do.
Yep.
If they wanna share it, they can charge you. If they wanted
It
to.
could, also remember that you're, cause the seller will often, not often, but there's a lot of times the seller says, well, don't I need to get an appraisal? Cause you're giving them comps and saying this is what the price is, and the seller says, well, shouldn't I get an appraisal? No, not unless it's court ordered. And sometimes if it's a trust or an estate sale or something like that, or a divorce, sometimes it does say you have to get an appraisal in advance. Most of the time it doesn't. And the lender can't use that appraisal anyway. So I always tell them, no, you're wasting your money as a listing, as a seller. You're losing your money by getting an appraisal unless it's for some reason
Because the
court
buyer
ordered or
has to
required
do
by
it,
trust
or
or
the
estate or
buyer's
whatever.
I
So
just
common
think-
interaction points, communication of deadlines, communication of contract with other parties, communication of list of recommended contractors, movers, cleaners. Title company, scheduling communication with inspectors and buyer's agent, sending amendments or inspection reports to their site. Same thing, we kind of went over all this stuff. One thing I will say also, what we just mentioned about, my brain just lost it. Another thing too, is if you're trying to bulletproof your transaction as far as that goes, and you have a seller and they're willing to accept FHA, right? You may want to look into those things that you're walking through that you know could, like she's saying, because what happens with an FHA appraisal is that sticks with the property for 6 months. So if they do that FHA and it flags the roof and your buyer's like, no, we're not dealing with it, like yours, any other FHA buyers that are gonna come, that appraisal's stuck on there, everyone's gonna see that roof repair.
Let me give you a fun fact.
What?
They, like Division of Appraisals with the United States, I don't know what it's called, they don't have like an NAR, they have something kind of similar. They're
Are they
pushing to
changing
have
it?
every single appraisal stick with the property for 90 days no matter what.
Really?
And you have to go in and challenge it to be able to get it. You got it.
So would that change the other ones to only be 90 days and not?
I think they're trying to get
6
it
months?
universally, any appraisal done with the property would have a case number assigned to it, not just FHA or VA.
An FHA would not be 6 months anymore, it would just change.
It would just all be 90 days. Also, fun fact on flips, this is something to be aware of for your, as a listing agent. Most
FHA.
FHA loans will not lend on a property that was sold within the last 90 days.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have to have day 91 before you can close. And if you don't know that, and you're this, let's say you're the listing agent, and you agree to an FHA loan that has a 30-day closing, guess who's in default of the contract? The seller.
And what happens
Do you
if
think
they've got a
your sellers
$20,000
gonna
earnest
give a
deposit that you accepted?
Deposit? Probably not. They're probably gonna be pretty upset with you, right? So
This money looks wonderful when it's in high amounts, but make sure that you're prepared to pay it back if something happens.
times where, like they said, I don't wanna sell, like I've decided to stay, we don't, whatever changed in our plans. And we've been under contract, and that's a default.
So one of those HGTV programs, we'll stay.
We're gonna stay,
Now that it's-
yes, now, we love it, we're gonna stay. Yes, no, I really have had
Love it or
one,
leave it.
like, yeah, love it or leave it.
Or love it or list it.
Love it or leave it.
Yeah.
Any ahas?
Get the other one set up. You're flipping.
Need to attend that contracts class for sure.
Is you,
Attend the contracts class,
is this, no, these are just,
this is just us talking through like what they gotta do for postpone.
I think one thing is to know what is your side of the business, like very clearly, because if not, you're gonna start sharing more information and needed that
Mhm.
will end up eating or fighting you back.
For sure.
And just as you mentioned, go from the end, from the end to the beginning,
Mhm.
so that you see what could potentially kill your deal and address that first.
In first, yep. And I think that it's really important too, to keep in mind, when you are thinking of your transactions and you're thinking of bulletproofing them and you're going through all of this with your client, know what they need to know and make sure you're communicating that. But you hit the nail on the head when you said, know what you should and shouldn't be communicating. Because if you're talking to the seller and you're saying, oh, well, the buyer can't or won't or whatever. And a lot of times we'll have, like, I had an agent that was just asking me a question because the listing agent, when he called, said, we want to submit an offer, but there was a part of the property they couldn't see. And she goes, well, we're not going to look at it if you haven't seen that part. And he was like, they can't do that, right? They have to present it. I said, it depends. What did the seller tell them to do? Because if the seller says, I've had times where the seller says, we're not going to accept blind offers. They have to see the condition of the home because they don't want to go through all the hoops and the contracts and all the things. So I have had sellers that have directed me to say, we won't see it unless they've been in the home. We won't accept blind offers, right? That's not my decision to make, that's the seller's. And we can't communicate things that the seller doesn't give us approval to communicate. So a lot of times we're our own worst enemy. And if you have someone on the other side, like Wade, or like me, who's going to get you talking intentionally, why? Because that is an advantage to me. If I know what your seller's looking for, their time. And by the way, this isn't, as long as you've communicated with your seller, like, hey, are you okay if I share with people what's most important to you? What is most important? You should know what's most important to your seller. If someone asks, if a buyer's agent calls you and says, hey, what's most important to your seller in an offer, and you don't know, that's a problem. So you got to know what's most important, and can you communicate that? Now, you can communicate that price is most important without giving their bottom line, right? You can communicate that the timing is important without telling them why. You don't have to say, well, they're getting a divorce and they literally have this amount of time to be out and pay off the other party. that puts the seller at a disadvantage because now Wade knows they're on a tight timeline. So if he can meet the timeline, he can probably lowball the offer. But you can say, you know what, time really is important to them. They're ready to move on to their next step. And ideally, something that could close in 20 days would be perfect for them. But as long as you have your seller's permission to do that, but you just have to make sure you're not over disclosing. Just disclose what needs to be disclosed so that you guys can all work together for a win.
And you literally will call agents sometimes and they will just, like, sometimes I'm like, enough is enough. Like, they'll literally, like, they're going through a divorce and this, and their last offer came through and they accepted it and it was 10K under, but this fell through, and you're like, okay, we're gonna go 15K under.
Yeah, yeah.
We're gonna ask for closing costs, and we're gonna give them a tight closing because they just want to be out.
Yeah, there are honestly, there's been times where I'm just like, oh.
They're like,
I'm
they're
thinking to
gonna
myself,
get a
oh,
divorce and they're gonna choose
yeah.
arm.
Feel that's for them, right?
And don't be afraid to, like, I had a client that we went under contract yesterday who wanted to see a property and it was over what they could get qualified for. We ran some numbers with the lender, like, we could squeak it in, we had to get closing costs. I'm like, let's go look at it. So I called the agent thinking, because they're like, we want to put an offer, and I was like, there's no way. Well, it goes under contract that night, and I was like, why didn't they tell us before we came and looked at this house? It's in Clarkson, drove all the way up there.
Mm.
Anyways, it falls out of contract after like 3 days. Don't know why. Didn't ask, but it came back on the market, and I was like, there's no way they're gonna take, like, we literally need to come in like for be them like super comfortable, like $19,000 under, and we need like 8,000 closing costs. Like, I would tell you to go pound sand if you submit an offer online, like,
Yeah.
or my clients might, right? And I called and had a conversation. I just said, hey, before I submit this through, if they want to, I know that they were planning on doing it last time. I don't want you to think it's a lowball offer. This is literally like where, like, they love the house. If they can make it work, they'll make it work. It works for your sellers. If not, I just don't want you to think we're coming in super low so that you're countering, and this is like where they have to be. I think we can make a deal work. Go ahead and submit it through.
You just never know.
They didn't even counter or anything. We got like $18,000 off the list price and $9,000 in, or what, $12,000 in closing.
Oh my goodness, wow.
I was like,
You got permission from your buyer who say, can we do this?
so,
Also on the listing side of that deal, guys, anytime that, if something does fall through, I'll send something back out to anyone that showed it first. I'm like, hey, why don't you be the first to know before I put it back on the market? This is available again, as your buyer's still looking, and also with price reductions. I think if you were in team meeting a few weeks ago, you saw that, but I sent out a notice that's just like, hey, Wade, why don't you be the first to know? Even though everyone got the message, but I'm like, I want you to be the first to know. We just dropped the price on that house by 10,000. Is your buyer still looking for a house? Because if the buyer's still looking, maybe they didn't like it at 460, but at 440, it's really attractive,
Yeah.
right? So just make sure, I think that's a good way too, of just, in my head, if I can get it back under contract as quick as possible, and I don't even have to, all I have to do is switch who it's under contract with.
Yeah.
I don't have to switch it to active and under contract again, because for me, it's a red flag. If I'm looking at a property and it's been under contract 5 times, are you pinging just to know that you can ping?
no,
Oh.
I thought you were pinging just to know that you could ping.
no, that's.
See that it's been getting under contract 5 times. That's a red flag to me, and I'll call the listing agent, be like, hey, this property's been under contract a lot, like, what's going on? Because I don't wanna waste my time or my client's time. If it's fallen through 5 times because of inspection, and I know that's gonna be an issue for my client too.
So you just have to change who it's under, so you don't.
You can
change
just keep it
that
as
if
under
it's
contract, you just have to change the under contract agent.
The other thing you guys want to be wary of, I keep getting these little tidbits from the previous, but like the inspection too, like if they do share the full inspection report with you, that's another deal killer. You don't want to just give that to your seller.
Yeah.
Because now they know all of those things are known defects on the property, they have to disclose that stuff. So now they gotta go back to their seller
Yeah.
disclosures and add any of those things.
As the listing agent, I don't ever want an inspection report.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like,
Yep.
Oh.
you send me the snippets of the few that you need, if I need to like visualize them, or if my client wants to do them, but I don't want the whole report.
Oh.
Yeah,
Nice.
also fun fact, you do now have to disclose, and I've had times where people are like, well, I don't agree with that. Great, then you get a plumber to come check it now as the seller, and if the plumber tells you something different than the inspector did, now we don't have to disclose it, but if it's in alignment, you have to disclose it. And we had one just recently
Trying to get
that
it.
radon,
Oh, they locked,
Just
probably.
okay, we had one just recently, it wasn't mine, but it was an agent in our office, that by crazy happenstance, you guys, they decided not to do a radon inspection for some reason. But then they were like, well, maybe we should just check into it so we would know how much it is if we want to do it down the road. By some strange twist of fate, they end up calling this exact same radon company, and there's not very many in Utah, but there are a few. They called the exact same radon company. The radon company is like, oh, what's the square footage? What's the city? She just tells them the address. And the radon company goes, oh yeah, well, we actually just did a bid on that like 45 days ago. They knew there was radon. The previous seller or the previous buyer had canceled because the seller wouldn't fix it. They had it inspect, they had a bid done, seller didn't fix it, and the seller didn't disclose it.
They backed out, and then you're under contract on the same house with the same radon.
And if they would have never known, if they wouldn't have found that exact same radon place randomly. But the agent was like, oh, you know what?
can you hear me,
Gosh,
Rusty?
they totally forgot about that. Yeah,
Oh, 45 days ago.
Can you hear me, Rusty?
I can hear you.
Yeah, that was Claudia's, and it
I was
actually,
like, that was Claudia's deal.
the quote, the
She
previous
said-
quote, huh?
I wasn't naming names.
No, that's fine, but yeah, the previous, quote it was actually in the other agent's name. So it was the other agent that actually got the quote.
The other agent actually got the quote. I forgot about that part. So
Yeah.
the agent knew and didn't disclose to the new buyer. Guess what? The seller paid for radon repair, right?
Yep, they did.
on
They
mitigation.
remediated.
How you think matters. How you think in the beginning really matters. I don't know where they're going with that one.
All right, somebody read the quote.
I just did, but
All right, perfect. Moving along.
you need this?
I just do want to say with one thing here. Mindset is huge and it really does matter. And, I think this part right here sounds like so hokey, but are you aligned with your heart? There are gonna be days in this industry that are hard. And if you are like, I don't really care that much and want to keep doing this, it is gonna be really hard if you don't have like a why in your heart of why you're doing it. And so, I just think that it's important. There is gonna be on page, I don't remember what page in your book it is, but there's a little thing for you to like work through that says, what's your mindset? Are you aligned with your heart and take action? Are you ready to take action to have a successful day? I think it's important for you to just like, sometimes just like journal a little bit about like, on the good days, like make some little notes of like why you love what you're doing or what did you do that you felt made a difference for someone today? Cause those are things you can go back to later and it makes a huge difference.
It sounds so stupid when I first
It does
came
sound
here. I was
stupid.
like, this is the stuff I can't get on board with. Like, we're doing vision boards and talking about.
And now Wade's like, what is the vision board and what time and all that?
I was seriously like, this, I can't do this, like, I'm all for positivity, like, I'm a very positive person in
One
general, like,
moment.
but I'm like, I cannot get on board with this stuff.
Next
And
thing
then,
you know, Wade's like, do you wanna sing Kumbaya around the campfire today?
so we went to a thing, it was like, it was the shift to the overdrive thing, and we went there and they gave out name tags, and nobody used them, they all just stuck them on, and they, no one wrote their names on them. We're like, well, okay, I think they were even on a little square thing, so we just all stuck them, like, nobody wore them. And I get home and I'm like reviewing all the stuff, and there's just some super good stuff, and I stuck in between one of the pages, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking, and I'm like, I was kind of stressed out because some funky things had happened and some deals that were going south, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I was at the point where I was like, things have got to start picking up, like, I'm either need to go back to Lowe's or like find something else to do, like, shit's gotta change real quick. But I'm sitting there and then that name thing pulls out, and so I'm like, okay, and like, I wrote on there, it says, tell them my name is, and I wrote success. And I was like, I cannot not be successful, like my family, like my, and I stuck it on my bottom of my monitor, just stupid, I'm like, probably on a phone call and stuff I'm doing, not even thinking about it. Every morning I like would walk in there to do work, and I'd read this, and I kept thinking like, this is a stupid thing, I'm like, I need to throw that thing away, it's like driving me batty. And I read it every single morning, and I just started like, I literally like started dialing my processes, all that stuff. Like I would look at it and like, you have to be successful for your family. Like you have no other option to be successful for your family. What are you gonna do to get there? And like, just that constant reminder of like, you are in the right place, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like, these are all the things like made a huge difference. I started killing it like
Mind is so
Yeah.
powerful.
crazy. After that, I was like, okay, this really does work. I started like writing, like I have affirmations written on my board at home. Like I change out the one that's in our kitchen, like every month to something different. So
I love
it
it.
does work.
Mine, for the longest time, I just felt like my world was chaotic and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I have to become a master of my schedule. And instead of saying I will become or I'm gonna be or whatever, I just was like, I'm a master of my schedule. And I write it on my mirror every day at the expo marker, I'm a master of my schedule. I'm a master of my, and I sit there and read it. And then I have like a thick, like it's like this thick of, I call them my I ams. It's like anytime I have a limiting belief or anything that I'm working on or I want to do better, I write it as though it already is. And then I say that to myself every day. I like
Like,
flip
I'm
through
good
it
at
and I say,
remembering names.
like,
That's what I'm going to do.
Yes.
mine is like, I have so many things where it's like, I have the exact message someone needs to hear to me today. I am confident. I am an investor. Like before I was an investor, I started saying, I'm an investor. I tell myself every single day I'm an investor. And then you start to tell yourself that and your mind is trying to find ways to make it work. I am a master of my schedule. I am punctual. I am like, I have a whole list that I could sit and roll through and it changes. And I leave those in there even when I have overcome them because they're a limiting belief that they crept into my head for some reason at some point, and I don't want them to creep back. So I tell myself who I am every day because we get to choose who we are and how we show up. And that's to me the most important thing about a mindset. You get to decide how you're going to show up and who you're showing up as. Nobody gets to tell you who you're going to be but you. But you have to tell yourself the future version of yourself, who you want to be. So my little list of I ams are things that I get in my head with. And those become my I ams because they're powerful. And it really does, like, you're like, I am, like one of mine for a while was, I mean, and it still is, again, it's still in my book, but it was, I'm an excellent instructor because I would get nervous when I would first start teaching. And I was like, no, I am an excellent instructor. And I kept continuing to tell myself that. And I think I'm a freaking excellent instructor. And maybe I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I believe I am. And so but I'm telling myself what the future version of me looks like. Consistently, I'm telling myself that. And it's also always a reminder to yourself and your brain's trying to remind you,
Oh, yeah. And you are
a master of your schedule, right? Like, it's like, oh, I am a master of my schedule. That's right. I'm following my calendar. Life Force C2Ts. This is our belief system. I think we talk about this a lot. So I just would tell you, live by these in your business. And again, like, I'm a big believer of take this with you. This isn't just business. Like, I just re-listened to the book, The 4 Agreements. And if you guys have never read that or listened to it, it is an excellent book and it's a short read, but it's talking about the 4 agreements. To me, these are kind of like fall into line with those. Those 4 agreements are, and these are, they're important in your personal life, your business life. I think if everybody lived their life under a belief system like this, it would just, the world would be a better place. As we're reflecting, this is our very last week of Ignite. I want you to think back to, I think it was maybe like week 3 that we talked through the value proposition and you guys were working on your value proposition. If you weren't here then, you're going to go through a value proposition later. But look back on that value proposition and think through if that really does portray the value of who you are and what you bring. And then are you confident sharing your value proposition with people that you know? And if not, how can you make it easier to share your value proposition? And also keep in mind that if you start out with one value proposition and you're just like, you know what, that's not resonating, or I said I was going to do this, but actually that's not something that I'm going to do for the client or whatever it is, you can revise that. So that's a good time. It's just a good time as you're kind of wrapping up and thinking through things, look through and revisit that. Also, it's always good to revisit your big life, your vision to your future. And here's the thing, this is like goes along with big why, which I think is here too. Big why is right here. This is the reason that you get up every day. Your big why will likely shift and it will change and it will evolve. And it will change and evolve with time. It will change and evolve with age. It will change and evolve with purpose. It will change and evolve with the people that you surround yourself with and the people that you're in proximity with. And proximity really is power. And I think that a lot of times we don't think big enough. And you can think really big and your big why can change as you go, right? Like I've said before, my big why started with really like, this was back in check writing days, guys. I got licensed in 2007. But like, I remember I would write our mortgage check and I would be like, oh my gosh, I hope paycheck comes in before the check goes through, right? And there was so many times where I would just lay there and I'm like, this is not the legacy and the life. Like first it was the life. I was like, this is not the life I want to live. This is not, I don't want to live always worried about what's gonna happen next with financials. And so one of the very first, and I didn't even really realize it was an affirmation at the time, but I just kind of like in my head started going, I just wanna have more money than anything I could ever, like, I wanna always be able to have enough money or more money to do anything that I would want to do. And that's kind of my why started with like providing just a different life for my family. And then it's grown, right? But your big why should change and evolve. And so if you're ever feeling disconnected from your big why, it's okay to revisit that. And maybe it stays the same, but there's pieces that layer into it. But it's okay to change that as you go. And a big why powers your big life. If you don't have a big why, it's really hard to get up every day. And again, we've already talked, like this industry can be tough. Like it's not always the funnest to get up every day and go, holy crap, like I'm unemployed again, right? Because you wake up every day unemployed. And if you have a big why connected to it and you're really saying like, this is why I'm doing it, it makes such a difference. Like I have a friend that yesterday I saw her and she was telling me that she got this cat and she's so excited. And she's just like a remodeler, so she's got a whole thing. And I'm like, yes, you're doing it. And this is her big why and it has been. And she's like, I just have, and I'm like, and I almost at the same time, I'm like snowed in on Thanksgiving and Christmas. She's like, and she had this big why. So every day she's waking up and she's powering the big why. She's feeding that because the money's going to push her big life, right? And the things that she wants to do. Any ahas on mindset? Okay. This is just the 6 core competencies of a business. So as we're wrapping up Ignite, whether you're in already successful as an agent or you're becoming a new agent, you've got to remember the 6 core competencies of a business. If you're not doing these things, you're not a business. So number 1, you've got to lead generate, capture, and convert to appointments. You have to lead generate in some way, shape, or form. You have to be able to lead generate. You have to find a way to capture the leads, and then you also have to be able to convert the leads. If you can lead generate all you want, but if you don't know how to convert the leads, you're not going to be able to get them to go into contract. You've got to know how to present to buyers and sellers to get an agreement. You have to. You've got to meet with them. You've got to be able to have to speak to them, and you've got to be able to get contracts signed. If you are having a ton of conversations but no appointments, you need to look at your scripting. That's where something's broken. If you're going on a ton of appointments and they're not signing a contract, you need to think about your value proposition and your consultation and your strategy session, because that's where your disconnect is. If you're going under contract and your deals are falling through all the time, which is the one we just talked about was contract to close, you need to look at your processes because something's happening there. So it's really easy to diagnose the problems in your business if you're tracking what's happening. If you have no idea how many calls you made to get one appointment or how many appointments you went on to get one to sign a contract, you don't know if you're tracking on pace, below pace, or ahead of pace. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You've got to show buyers and market sellers. That's part of your 6 core competencies of being in business. You've got to know how to write and negotiate contracts. This is one of the most important things that we do is write and negotiate contracts. You have to be able to coordinate the sale to closing. If you go under contract, but you can't solve problems once you're under contract to be able to get it to close, again, I don't know if you guys noticed, but nobody's just paying you hourly. You're only going to get paid when it closes. And sometimes you're going to be like, if I don't even want to know how many hours I spent on this, because my hourly rate went significantly down, right? Like sometimes you're going to want to know. But that's why also don't undervalue yourself, because you never know which listings are going to sit, which buyers are going to look forever. And if you're lowballing yourself, oh man, you're going to spend a lot of time in process. And number 6, you have to know how to manage the money. I think there's a lot of people that are really good at converting appointments. I think there's some people who are really good at presenting to buyers and sellers. I think this part, showing buyers and marketing sellers, a lot of people are good at that in our industry. I don't think that's
Probably one of the easier.
That's probably one of the easier things to do. I think writing and negotiating contracts, there's a lot of people that are good at it. Not everybody's great, but I think a lot of people. I think coordinating sell to closing, most of the people can work through that. Managing the money to me is one of the biggest mistakes agents. Because there are times, like I had 3 closings on Friday. That was like $50,000, $54,000 in one day.
You're like, mama's gonna go get a new Prada bag.
Right? But honestly,
But
there,
no.
I can't tell you
No.
the amount of times that like,
You
and
can go out
anytime
and buy new cars.
closing, and then they're driving in their new BMW, and I'm like, You got $8,000, what, you know?
Yeah.
But you have to be able to manage your money, and you also have to know, like, what are the expenses coming up? What are taxes? Where's the money gonna go? And this is the area that I see, guys, there's so much money to be made in this industry, and I see so many people that make a ton of money. And then they're struggling to figure out how to pay the $1,000 board dues, right? And that happens sometimes. We've all had issues. We've had ups and downs and all arounds with money. But if you can get really good at taxes,
You know what? How
there are
much?
so many times that people are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how much I was gonna owe in taxes. If you get good at managing your money and just play red light, green light with your expenses, I know it can be tempting when you're like, damn, that just hit my account in one day, that was awesome. And you also have to remember that there's gonna be, oh, well, there's expenses that come out of that. What else is in my pipeline? Like, a lot of times people forget to look at their pipeline. Yeah, you had a great day with 3 closings. Well, do I have 3 more closings lined up in my pipeline? Or am I now 6 months out because they didn't lead generate during that whole time? Which this is common. We see agents' business go flat, spike, flat, spike, flat, spike. And that's the reason, because when they're in contract, they're forgetting that they have to lead generate. So then they close a bunch, and then they have money in their account and they go, whoo, and they stop the hustle. And then they run out of money in their account and they're like, I got lead generated here, right? And it's common. And this is not being said from a place of judgment or any other way. It's just me saying, figure out how to manage your money. And if you suck at it, find someone to help you to manage your money, okay? Where your commission dollars go. So for every dollar, you have usually, well, this has changed a little, but typically you would have one commission that comes in, but you're splitting it with the other side. Your commission's gonna come in, your market center, so that's your split to KW. Part of that's gonna go to your market center. You're gonna have some business expenses. You're gonna have taxes, and then there's your take home. Okay, so, and remember that we're independent contractors, so our taxes are not taken out of this check. That's a gross check amount that you get from the brokerage. Your business expenses are not taken out of that, and so you have to keep those things in mind. If there's nothing else that you take away from today, what I would suggest is set up a business account. Just create an LLC. Do that. If you want to remain an individual owner, you can. That's fine if you want to be a sole proprietor, but set up a separate account. Have it be totally separate from your personal finances. Put whatever amount you feel like you can to be able to set your business up for success. Have your commission checks go directly to that account. You can change that anytime with Chris. And have your expenses also come out of that account. It makes it way easier when it comes tax time, right? It's easier when you're doing your P&Ls every month or every 3 months or whenever you're doing them. And then in that separate account, here's my separate account, my commission money drops into it. And you just got $10,000 in your checking account. Figure out with your accountant, how much do you need to put aside for taxes? And if you don't know, I would say save 25%. Because remember, you're self-employed. So save 25 to 30%. I'm not a tax accountant. This is not tax advice because this is being recorded. I told them to check with their accountant.
Yes.
But if you haven't had time to meet with an accountant or you're just not sure, put aside 25 to 30% in a separate savings account or a separate account of some way, shape, or form. So if 10,000 drops in, and you put 3,000 in that account, just imagine that that was a check that you were an employee for someone and they took the taxes out for you. They took out your federal, your state, your all the withholdings. Can't think of the other ones that come up, but there's all the
And
things.
Marcus talks about too, doing this and just like setting up multiple accounts within an account, like they'll let you do multiple savings accounts, right? Rename them all, so you can put taxes, you can, if you're planning on an investment property or something, you're gonna know that you're gonna save money in and you're gonna budget for that. Name that account for investments and have it just be for that. If you're doing, what's the other, like if you're gonna do for like retirement or 401k, right? Like put those separate accounts and just get them completely out of there, because having that lump sum in your bank account, like she said, especially when you get a nice big paycheck, it's so easy to just think like, oh, I'm good, I got all this.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh crap, where did that go? Like 3 months down the road.
And then the other thing is, let's say you put 30% in your tax account and then you do your taxes and you have all your write-offs in your accounts, like great news, your tax brackets, whatever, and you have too much money in that tax account, that's basically your refund now, right? So you just funded your own taxes. Also, if you read a book called Profit First, which is a great book, it actually will tell you to put like them in a different account. So it's not super easily just transferred
you
back and forth.
Don't see it every time you
So
log
you don't see it every time you log in. Like if I'm logging into this bank account, it maybe really only has that, but my taxes or my savings or my investment account are over here. And those I don't even see when I log into this specific operating account. So just a little fun fact for you. If you're financially sound or unsound, so this is just going through a little example of like this commission, this is like we're talking about. So the commission was sold for $9,000. Jessica Campbell is our example. She got of that check after her splits. She got $5,760. She put it in her personal little piggy bank, which goes directly to her wallet. So she didn't have any business savings or tax savings, which worked. I mean, it's going to ask you the question of which one is sound and which one is financially unsound. Which do you guys think, right or left? So it's like we're on pins and needles. Which one's financially unsound? Same thing over
Depends on
here.
if she's got a side hustle, maybe she's
Right,
gonna
maybe
throw
she-
that money to someone.
Yeah. She's got a sold commission, she gets the amount of money, she puts $1,728 in her business bank account. In her personal account, she has $4,000 that comes in. And then some of that 1,600 goes to tax savings, some of it goes to federal and state, some of it goes to self-employment, and then her wallet gets $2,419. That one's same. So money is good for the good it can do. I think we've already talked about this. This is just the flow of money. And I know this seems, again, sometimes like if we've already been in business or we're great at budgeting, this seems like an elementary concept, but we really do have to remember income is what goes in, our expenses is what goes out, and the profit is what's left at the end of that. And so if you are spending more than your income coming in, your profit's going to be very little or not at all. And especially in the beginning, we oftentimes think like we have to have this or we have to have that. Just be cautious with your income and make sure that your expenses, that every expense should be able to, like it's either a necessary expense or if it's something that you're spending on like marketing or leads or whatever, inspect what you expect from that investment in your business. Okay. So this is just saying to work that backwards. So if you look at what your profit goal is, and then you say, okay, how can I minimize the expenses? So if I know my profit goal, we're just gonna use 100,000 for easy expenses. For easy math, if I know my profit goal is 100,000 at the end of the year, that's what I actually want to profit. And I can minimize my expenses, maximize my net income. So I'm gonna look at that and go, okay, realistically, what are my expenses? And I figure that my expenses are gonna be about $30,000 a year. Then my net income, I have to make, my total income, my gross commission income, I have to make $130,000 because if my expenses and everything else is 30, that's how I'm gonna net.
If you guys ever want to sit down with Rusty and do a business plan, like, this is exactly what it is. You're gonna sit down and say, what is the income that I want to make? Right? What's the profit that, or like, what's the income I want to end up with, right? What do you gotta get to get there? What are my expenses gonna be? She'll help you break down all of your stuff, like.
By the way, November 14th, put it in your calendar. It's an all day, I guess I should actually check but that's right, that's not my phone. That's your phone. Good thing I didn't put it in my bag and zip it up. I'm pretty sure it's November 14th. Let me just double check really quick. So November 14th is gonna be our business planning clinic. Have that marked out to be here all day. It'll be probably 9:30 to 5. We're gonna break this down exactly, including like what expenses can you plan for and how do you kind of we'll come up with some averages for you if there's some things you're not sure about. So come to that because we really do walk through that and you walk out with an actual business plan from that class.
And that's here.
Here, yep. Expenses related to your real estate business. So a cost of sale and an operating expense. Does everyone know the difference between a cost of sale and an operating expense?
Operating expenses are gonna be like your office supplies and gas, I guess.
What you spend to what you save?
Your monthly fees.
Is it turned off again?
Oh, turn it up.
No, I said what, your differences.
Literally just turn it up. Okay, we're ready?
Now we can
What-
hear you.
Okay, what you spend to what you're actually setting aside?
No, so operating expense, you're on the right track, Melissa. So your operating expenses are costs that you have to run your business. There are costs that you have regardless of whether you make a sale or not. So your cell phone bill is a cost of is an operating expense. If you rent an office space, that's an operating expense. If you had office supplies you had to buy, that's an operating expense. If you needed a new laptop, that's an operating expense. Your vehicle maintenance is an operating expense. Anything that you have, your monthly fee to the office, anything you have to pay no matter what, just to operate your business in a day-to-day capacity, that's an operating expense. A cost of sale is a cost that only occurs in the event that you sell something. And we're going to go through this in detail in our business planning clinic too. So a cost of sale, for example, would be your split with your company. That's a cost of sale. You don't pay your cap unless you close transactions, right? That's a cost of sale. Your photography is an operating expense because you have to pay it whether the house sells or not. But a closing gift could be considered a cost of sale because if you don't buy it unless something closes, now it's a cost of sale. Does that make sense? Does that help you kind of differentiate? Transaction coordination, a lot of times is a cost of sale versus an operating expense because that transaction coordinator's only getting paid when you close on the property. So if you think of those two things that way, a referral fee, for example, if somebody sent you a referral for a client, you don't have to pay them unless the house sells. That's a cost of sale, right? But for example, like insurance, marketing, advertising, education, those are all operating expenses. Cost of sale is, if you just think cost of sale, if I sell something, this cost occurs, that's going to be the two things that you're going to figure out. The reason it's important to know the difference between these two things is because some of this, you just have no matter what, right? If you decide to hire someone, when you get to a point in your business, you want to hire somebody, if you hire someone and they're on a salary, you have to pay them whether you close or not, if it's set up in that way. You have to pay your office fees whether or not you close anything, right? There's certain things you have to pay. That's going to help you figure out the bare minimum that you have to make in your business just to maintain the cost of just to maintain your business itself. And then there's going to be costs that occur when you have an actual sale. These are just some best practices, gain clarity on your big why, set your personal and business budgets. If you haven't recently gone through and like played red light, green light with your expenses, here's how I suggest you do it. I think this is a impactful exercise if you actually print out. So take every bank account that you have, print out your last like 6 months worth of expenses, whether they're personal or business, and go through and highlight. So the things that are green are like, no matter what, this is an expense I want to keep. In your personal life, that could be gas, I got to pay it. Utilities, I have to pay them. My mortgage payment, I got to pay it. Those are all going to be green. You can't get rid of them. But Netflix, maybe that's an orange. Maybe you're watching that because if you don't make more money, maybe Netflix is going to be your next round of when you come back through and look at this budget again, you're going to decide if you need that. Gym membership, is that a green? Is that an orange or is that a red? Starbucks, is that a green, an orange, or a red, right? So that's how I would do it. And I think that that's a really good exercise to do as you're kind of thinking through your personal and your business budget. Same thing with your business accounts. If you're looking through that, if you want to be really scared, go through your Amazon.
Oh,
Go through your Amazon list of just pull up your most recent orders and say, was that a green light? Like, did I really need that? Or was that just like some impulse purchase because I really wanted to get my dog's ball
Because it
delivered
was on
the
sale.
next morning and I had to buy all these other things to get to $25.
It was basically free. It was on
It's
sale.
free. Open up additional bank accounts. We already kind of talked about that. It's easier if you just transfer somewhere else. You don't have to look at it. It's less tempting. Download and use the MREA chart of accounts. So that's the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. There's a chart of accounts. This will also be part of the business planning clinic, but you can look at that under resources. It's just basically how do you code things? If you haven't been an independent contractor before, it's going to give you some categories you should be coding things in. So is this a marketing cost? Is it an outside sales? Is it photography? Like whatever it is, you can categorize them. It makes it, is it auto maintenance, right? Number one, you're going to have that in your tax for your tax accountant. But number two, it's also going to help you be aware of what you're spending. You can look at that and go, man, is this in alignment with really what I wanted to be spending? Purchase and downloaded tax accounting software. You can do that. You can do QuickBooks. Quite frankly, I think you can even just do that. You can do this as an Excel spreadsheet. You can use numbers on your Mac. You can do whatever you want there. Hire an accountant, CPA, attorney, or tax advisor. I do think this is key. I think there's a lot of people who are like, I'm not making that much money yet. I'm just going to try to do my own taxes. Just don't do it. It's just not worth it. Just hire somebody to do that. And you don't have to hire someone to do like your books every single month, but for sure, no matter what, hire someone to do your taxes and advise you on it.
If you're gonna do like a sole prop or something like that,
because they'll
Yep.
set you up to not screw yourself.
Exactly. Set dates to calculate and pay your estimated taxes. This is where your CPA or accountant, tax attorney, or tax advisor can come into help too. Keep in mind that you can pay your taxes quarterly, you can pay them annually. You're gonna come up with whatever your best strategy is for that. You can pay them monthly, right? It's gonna come up however you wanna do it. If you're not paying enough, you will get fees and penalties for that. So just make sure you have someone else that you're saying, hey, this is what I'm planning to do. Does this look okay? Other little fun fact, because this hits people all the time. In June, every year, look at your money. Say, have I made more money than I thought I was gonna? Because if you talk to your accountant based on last year's numbers, or at the first of the year you talked to them, they said, put this amount of money away for taxes, and now you've made way more money than you think, you need to have a conversation in June with them, because it would be worth your while to start saving more money till the end of December, so that when you file taxes, you're ahead versus behind.
That first year I touched back with my tax people, I think it was like October or November, and she was like, you know what? No, you what? Wow, I wasn't expecting you to make that much. And I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, me either. Am I screwed? She's like, no, we'll just need to, we need to make some changes. Yeah, there's some things we'll have to change and we're gonna have this. And I was like, oh,
And there's certain things you can do in retrospect, like you could have funded a self-directed IRA up until like September 15th for 2023, like to offset tax consequences. So this is why it's important to have something. Prepare for your future with insurance, savings, and investment. A couple things people don't think about, and again, this is just me spilling. I'm not a professional accountant, insurance agent, or anything of the sort. But like, do you want to have like some self-funded disability insurance? Like, what would happen if you couldn't work? Do you need to have that as part of your thing? Do you need an umbrella insurance? Do you need to increase the insurance on your auto policy? You might need to, right? Like
or
maybe
what
you
if
have
die
those.
tomorrow is everything.
Do you have life insurance? You guys, a term life insurance policy is really inexpensive, but it can provide so much peace of mind to people that you leave behind. So just little things like that, be thinking through that and preparing for it. And again, like investments, like that's never just going to be easy to all of a sudden just drop a bunch of money. So if you're saving a little bit for that all the time, knowing that you want to do that, if you're like, okay, no matter what, I can put 10% of everything I make into my investment account. And then you know how much you have to make in order to have the down payment for your investment. Think and act the wage you want before you earn it. Average is as average does. Good is as good does, and great is as great does. What you do is what you become. I fully believe this, and this goes back to mindset and everything else. If you're thinking from a scarcity mindset, you will remain in a scarcity mindset. If you're telling yourself you're broke, you don't have the money, you don't have this, that will always continue, and that's the mindset that you will have, and that's what will manifest. I'm a firm believer in this.
It's just like, like that's 100%, because now I look at it. Like before I was like, I'm not the top agent. Like, why would I've got all these other top agents that are in my sphere. Like, why would they use me? Why would they? Now, if I know someone's thinking about selling their house, like I'm in there, I'm getting a listing appointment with that person. I don't care who it is that's going, whether it's Rusty or anybody else. Like I can step to that plate and
Yep.
swing the bat just as good as she can. Like
Absolutely.
I'm gonna, no doubt in my mind.
Yep. And by the way, I guarantee you also that Wade, even if I had already met with them, they're like, oh, I already met with someone, but they haven't signed anything. He's gonna go, you owe it to yourself to get a second opinion. And he is gonna go on and knock it out of the park, right? So, think and act the wage you want before you earn it. But just don't spend the way you want before you earn it. Walk the walk. But maybe just don't go buy all the things. And then always just like, really, I do think great is as great does. Like, don't operate at an average level if you want to have great results. And that's with everything. Like, don't go into your workouts just like you're gonna do the bare minimum. If you want this great result, go in with a great, like working out great. And this is just to revisit your net income and profit goal. Just remember net income, again, you're gonna kind of start from the bottom. We're gonna go through this later. But if you wanted to figure out from average transaction, if you wanted to sell 20 homes a year and your average commission is $10,000, then that's $200,000 in total gross income. And then you have to figure out your net income goal, your profit, your company dollar and royalty, and then your business expenses. I personally think for an individual agent, 15 or 35%, because this equals 50%, saying 50% is going to be company dollar and business expenses. I think that's more in alignment with someone who's operating a team or maybe a higher producing that has an admin or something like that. I think for an individual agent, this really should remain about 30% in my opinion, not necessarily 50%.
I even had
between your
higher expenses when
expenses.
we did mine because of like the stuff that we figured out, and it was way less than 35.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind, because that's the amount of money that you have to make to hit your net income goal. This is just gonna tell you how to get paid at closing. Actually, we have classes on this, so come to an opportunities class and they'll tell you how you get paid. Fun fact, if you don't have any of your stuff in command or do the proper documentation, you're not gonna get paid until you do that. Any ahas? I think that the last part of it is just accountability. Accountability is important because this is now someone else that knows your goals and has said, like, I see you, I know what you're trying to do, and let me help hold you accountable to it. It keeps your mindset focused and positive. It reminds you of your big why. The accountability challenges you and makes you uncomfortable at times. And it's one of our 6 personal perspectives, which is be accountable. There's a lot of different types of accountability. You can have an accountability partner. You could say, hey, Wade, you know what? I'm having a really hard time. I used to have a friend that we would text each other in the morning when we were up by 5 a.m. and I decided I'm not part of the 5 a.m. club, just because I'm comfortable in like 5:45 to 6 a.m. I'm not a 5 a.m.er. I'm not a 4:30 a.m.er either, because I'm a night owl and I stay up late. But we had accountability where we would text each other and say, hey, I'm up, madam, let's roll. It's a productivity coach, it's a mentor, it's a MAPS coach. I don't think you should pay for a MAPS coach until you are at a different level of production. So I think go through productivity coaching program and then coordinate with Allison on what makes sense to stay in coaching, to go on your own, or to get a MAPS coach. Some tools for this are the 4-in-1 time blocking and the One Thing. If you haven't read the One Thing book, it's great. It's just really saying, what is the number one thing that's going to make everything else easier and necessary? It talks a lot about Pareto's principle, which is the 80-20. 20% of your effort is going to result in 80% of your results. 80% of the stuff doesn't matter. Focus on your 20% and make sure you time block it. You have to be a master of your schedule. If you don't, if it's not in your calendar, it's not going to happen. It just won't. And the busier you get, the better you have to be at being a master of your schedule. And the 4-in-1 is a really good tool to do that. And if you don't know what that is, we can go through it another day. This is just reminding you, be learning based. There's some events coming up, family reunion. I would tell you, whatever you can do to get to family reunion, it is a different level of education. It's a different level of networking. You see what you're doing on a much larger scale. It's in Vegas, it's close. You could drive there if you wanted to. I personally am a big believer in events. I've never left an event that I didn't grow, either in my business, my income, something that I was doing. And it's always good to network and know people in other places. So make sure you're knowing more about your market. You can go on tours. You can know days on market, new construction codes. Just learn more about your market. Be the expert. You can do that even if you don't have clients, right? Like, I know for the longest time, I had a friend that she lived and she was like, I want to know about everything in Roy. Like, I want to be the expert here. So every morning she would set herself up on a hot sheet that she got every new listing in Roy. And so she knew everything that was coming on the market, what it was priced at, what the houses looked like. I think that's a great thing to do in your neighborhood. You can go on the MLS and draw a box around a neighborhood and get anything that comes up in that. Now you're becoming that expert in that area.
Or you can change it to the county and just
Yes.
look at the new listings that are on there every morning if you want to. But
Yep.
I think I was terrified of this at first. I was like, how am I gonna know? Well, like, you try to oh, do I need to know the numbers and just being active and in there and looking, it's gonna come to you guys. You're gonna know, by the time you get in a few months, you're gonna be like, that is no way in hell is that closing for 475. They'll be lucky if they get 425. Then you come back 3 weeks later and you're like, oh, look, 415 and 10 paying concessions. What do you know?
Yeah.
You'll start to see the trends and stuff that happen. So don't stress yourself out on too much of knowing the minor details, but just be active and in the market. Don't wait for people to search for stuff for you, or you need to be in there looking at things and paying attention to stuff. Even if you don't notice what you're fine tooth detailing on, you're gonna see the bigger picture as things start to shift and change. And you'll see it with concessions, you'll see it with list price, with price reductions. It's weird. You'll see mini markets, you'll see it happen in different counties. You just have to be actively in there looking and engaged.
If you're going to be the expert of the market, really work on being the expert.
And start small, like you said, start with your neighborhood.
You're-
You'll start to see
you
the
should-
stuff there. and-
Market, not having your neighbors calling and saying, did you see this mislisted their house? You should know that's on the market. Attend events and then read, Millionaire Real Estate Agent. I think if you read this before we met for business planning clinic, it's gonna be a huge advantage to you. So if you have time, read this in advance of that. Shift is another great one. And then the one thing, the shift is such a great one, even if you're not in a shifting market, it's just got a lot of really good tactics in there. And I'm just a big fan of fueling your mind. So I read, I listen to podcasts, whatever it is.
These are
it's
all
gonna help you
great
be learning-based.
audiobooks too, because I'm
Yeah.
not a reader either.
Yep. And then here's just some learning-based courses. A lot of these we have at the Market Center. A lot of them are gonna be further along in your career. When you're hiring, you need to go to career visioning, but that shouldn't be something that you're probably attending right now today. And then sales skills, there's a lot of things that you can do online for these things. And I think that's it. Yep, pretty sure, right? There we go. Okay, I need some ahas. And then we have some graduates. So exciting.
I liked, being able to narrow down how to like get the listings to become an expert in a certain area, just on my MLS. Cause I go on there and I'm like, well, where do I start? So I just like
Pick an
start
area.
randomly typing in things and going, what's going on there?
No, pick an area or pick a price point too, right? Like,
Okay.
a lot of times, even in the business planning clinic, one of the things that they'll ask you is to figure out what's your average price point, because that's how you're gonna figure your average commission. Well, if you haven't sold a lot of houses, you probably don't know what that is. The way I always tell people to figure their average price point, probably the people that you know are going to be your first clients. So think of the average people that you know, and what do you think the average price of their house is?
Right.
So if the people in your sphere, their average house is probably about 500, you can guess that's probably gonna be about your price point. If you're working more with first-time home buyers, you could err on the side of like, 450 or under is probably gonna be in your first-time home buyer range. If you're working with a lot of investors, chances are your average price may be a little lower, right? Depending on what they're doing.
It's our thing to hear, like, out loud.
What?
First time home buyers, 450 and under.
Oh,
Guys, what about when I, one of my first houses that I sold was like $102,000 condo, and it was nice, and it was in Bountiful. And it was
I
like,
gotta say, 100, that's nice, especially if it's a condo.
it was a $102,000 condo. There was like a $94,000 townhouse in Roy that was a short sale, and now they're like, those same ones are like $350.
Right.
Yeah,
My
so
first
just
one was
even
150.
sometimes it's just picking a price point. Like if you're like, I think I'll probably help people between 450 and 550 is probably gonna be my average range at first or whatever. Set yourself up a hot sheet for Weaver County between 450 and 550.
Is there like a YouTube quick class or something for the MLS and the best ways?
The MLS does classes on there
The
too.
MLS
If
is
you
the-
go in there, there's a little notification bell
Okay.
on the top, and they do classes like.
Also, they have
3 times
recorded
a week
classes
or
too, but they
something.
have,
That's fine,
uh-huh.
but yeah, I
Yep.
just, like I said, I'm like, looking around going, oh, that's fun, hey.
Also,
let's-"
part of the MLS will be like, have you done the 12-hour new agent course yet?
Yeah.
Didn't they go through some of that on MLS
She
too?
was, it was really brief. And it, just-
Okay.
a lot of it, since I was so new, is not very relevant. And so it's hard
Got it.
for me to pick up information when it's not relevant to something that I'm already, yeah. And so now that I'm more active and I am understanding things and how the system works, now I can go back and take that and go, oh, that's
You can
what I needed.
You can
Yes.
reach out to them too, and they have, I think, a calendar that you can get on, and they'll do
Uh-huh.
one-on-ones with you.
All right, I'll definitely check out.
Yeah.
my research.
And then honestly too, so like I would set up searches for like the price point you think you're gonna work in. You can also set them up for yourself, like what's your dream home, right? Like I have certain things that I'm just like, if this exact house came up, I would move. So I have hot sheets for that. Cause I'm just like, yeah, this one looks
And you might have
awesome,
clients that say that too, they're like,
right?
we're not gonna move, but if there ever was a thing, like,
No,
whatever.
exactly. I do have clients that are very specific that are like, this is what we want, and unless it's this, don't call. But so when that happens, I want to be like.
And that can be you getting that search, or you can set it up for both of you, but you can also just have that be your search, right? Like, if you have someone who's like, man, I'm looking for XYZ, I would set that up as a hot sheet. I would send them your app, tell them they can search on there if there's
Right.
ever anything that comes up. But I would set up a sheet for you. Like, I remember in the beginning, I would have so many that would just automatically come to me every day, and I would name them different things.
Gotcha.
Because then at that point, I was like, oh, Davis County, 300 to 400. Anything that popped up, like I want to know about it. And then I also use that as a reason to reach out to those people of like, hey, I know you said you were
Exactly,
looking for this.
exactly.
This is the closest one that I've seen lately. And I just wanted to tell you about it. I think that you're giving up a little bit in this, but man, the exterior, I think, is gonna make up for it. So I'm sending it to you anyway. Let me know if you wanna go see it, right? So keep that in mind. I think that that's a good way to get to know the market better.
I have some that are set up strategically to either be just for me or for them too.
Yeah.
It just depends.
Gotcha.
If you've got like active first time home buyers and they're like, well, we would do this or we would do that and we're okay with this, but if it's not like, I'm not plugging in certain things because some agents don't put things in accurately either, then you might miss something too. So I'm making it a little more broader and it's gonna blast them with everything. I want them to see everything. They're eager. They're like, if I've got someone that's like on the fence of stuff and they're like, again, it's a niche thing that they're looking for. I don't want them getting random things that
Right.
maybe an agent filled in wrong and it's a split entry home and I didn't want to filter it because people don't mark them right. And then they're gonna be like, why do you keep setting all that up? I told you specifically that I don't want any, right? I want those to come to me. I'm gonna filter through and then be like, look, what just hit the market.
And if you do just set those up like that too, I always let people know in advance. I'm like, just so you know, this
We
is
can
an
change
automated search.
Yeah.
So it's gonna send them to you. Don't think I woke up this morning and thought you were gonna love this house. It meets your criteria. You may look at it and go, it's got, green shag carpet and red walls and it looks like Christmas and you don't wanna go see it. Also, those are cosmetic and the easiest fixes, but just know you're gonna get some things that maybe aren't perfect. But if you have someone that's like, don't send me this crap, then yeah, you need to filter it first. And I always tell them, I get that the same day, I get it the same time you do. So I look at those every morning. If there's something I think is critical for you to see right away, I'm gonna call
Do you use that in like as lead generation in any way?
You could
you.
easily,
Totally could.
an easy thing to do, like she was talking. If
Like,
you're-
just
if-
like you're saying a general.
if you're wanting to focus on late, right, and you have a hard time of finding any first time home buyer properties that are single family in $250,000 to $350,000, and anything that's usually in that is like a crack house or whatever, right? You're gonna be like, you could just post it when it comes to you. You could say, like, you could hop on social media and say, hey, like, I've got an update for you guys. I've got the newest listings for, first time home buyers in the Layton area. If you're interested in getting it, let's reach out. Or here's my top 5. Who's interested in getting the top 5 listings right now in a first time home buyer market? Right? Like you can use it for all kinds of things.
Okay, cool. For sure. Is anyone trying to talk online?
Or when
Yes,
Up on the market too, like those are.
Resi,
I think.
hello?
It's green. The box is green.
Is it not working?
A few minutes ago and it was still on.
Okay, sorry, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me? I was gonna say thank you for talking about having those hard conversations with buyers when they want to list their home and sell it and they go out and rack up some credit card debt or get a new car loan. I mean, that's people, you think it's common sense, but people do it all the time.
People do it all the time and you do think it's common sense. And until, like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't ever feel like I had to have don't quit your job conversation with someone that was in the middle of getting a home loan. Like, that was not a conversation that I thought I was gonna have to have before you leave, unless you gotta get your graduation gift. For graduating in, yeah. 80% attendance or more. You were at almost everything, right? Can I take a picture of you?
Oh, dear.
Come on, you look so cute.
Jim.
You look so cute. Stand right here. We're gonna sell, look. Poor
gotta
girl,
celebrate
it's so
already.
sad, 'cause they didn't put any balloons up. Yeah. Love it, so
job.
cute. Good job, thank you. But, like, that's a conversation I never thought I had to have. And then I was like, now it's like every single person, I'm like, don't quit your day job. Don't change your
Right.
job. Don't do this unless you're talking about it. Cause even the fact of like my one client who was like, well, I'm looking for a job to make more money. I'm like, that's great. And you're on the brink of the loan you're trying to get. So unless you're gonna have more money down, you can't actually make more money until after you close on your house. Right? So just knowing their situation and making sure you have those conversations is critical. Thanks for sharing that. Any other ahas that we want to share, questions we want to go through? Ron also graduated. Woo, woo, woo.
Good.
You're welcome. Yay. Yeah. Congratulations. Nice job. High five.
Yeah.
And then I think Caitlin also did, but she's not. So, anyway, we're here to help. If you guys need anything, let us know. And, honestly, just go and do the thing.
Thanks. I have a side question real
Yeah.
quick, 'cause I have a little bit of anxiety, because I know the agent that he's gonna be mad when the seller cancels. But the seller tells me he wants to cancel,
Okay.
but,
Talk with
What's
Sean
gonna
about what that
happen?
needs to look like, because
because
the seller shouldn't just cancel. But the seller doesn't have to agree to an extension or an FHA repairs or an
Make the
addendum. What did they,
commute
did they
almost
actually
every
say
day.
an addendum or an amendatory clause?
They both, especially if
Did
the
the seller sign it?
so, no.
Just.
The seller has to sign anything just because they want,
So we have about
And is the cash
a
bill,
handful of.
here's the thing that I would always say too,
But.
make sure that the cash bill, thanks, Jason. You can leave if you want, or you can keep talking with us, whatever you wanna do.
All right, have a good night.
You too, see ya.
Make sure that
Sometimes
serving clean and.
cash buyers are always as cash buyer as they say. So that's the only other thing I start to rent funds, they still like, I've had times where, yeah, they just choose. So I think you need to really talk through the risks with your seller. Because you, right now, you know, you have, it's, you know what it is, you know they've done the appraisal, you know they're qualified, you know what that looks like, you've been through due diligence, I'm assuming.
A lot of work.
You've done all of those things, right? You've done all those things, a cash buyer could be throwing out cash offers on 8 different properties, and then they're gonna go through an inspection and redetermine what they wanna do. I've had cash offers that fall through the next day, I've had cash offers
And so,
do an inspection and then offer 50,000.
But he's looking to,
Even though
they
they
have a really lot to do it in the winter. So
Okay.
when I quit veterinary medicine,
they,
almost 3 years.
I know they want it, but we.
He basically was
can't,
just like, here you
you
go.
know, they tried to get throwing money at it. Like, it's more than, I'm like, I can't, more than a whole thing. Ethical,
Yeah.
but,
I
we've
told
got
him I'm like,
3
hey, well,
buyers who want it, so this is my preference. This is the other one, but we said no.
And I need it.
But then,
Have a different outcome.
so yeah,
And
the seller's
so,
like, you know, if you
Well,
want
does
this open the door, like, can we not
More
accept
of
it?
Nice, but well, after you labor, and my position is.
But what I'm worried about is, am I gonna get a death threat? Like,
No, they were,
you know,
they won't be in default, they just not agree to terms, so your buyer could still go on to convention.
To potential loan and say, okay, great, or they could still go, well, you don't have to accept the FHA,
Like,
in the canyon.
a mandatory clause, but they could still technically close with an FHA loan if there's no repairs.
You know, weather can
I
be
mean,
an issue.
that, I don't even know what that would look like, right? Cause
You don't even have your buyers, sellers sign that until like closing, do you?
it's
I
not
don't
any
know,
worse
like,
than like a 40-minute.
or like right before closing.
You know, it's way.
So
in fact,
there-
I think it's way worse than.
I mean, it's, so
Yeah.
there definitely is like, the buyer, you don't have to accept the addendum,
I would.
but the buyer also
Possibly the
now would
value
have to
would be as
cancel,
close as we
or
would
they
go.
can still try to move forward with what they're doing. So I think it's just important
you
to
know,
tell her no.
Bill.
And from the buyer's agent side,
Like, back in the day, me and my.
and this
sister
is,
wanted
it's hard, because you're like,
to-
oh man, like I have 1% return, I just don't wanna, like the buyer's agent's gonna be so mad, or that one, I think it was the listing agent's gonna be so mad. I'm like, but at the end of the day, you represent your client.
Right.
You don't represent them, and it's great, like, you
And
wanna
she's
be
got the
nice, you wanna be professional.
He's been
from
the airport.
Braden,
And so he doesn't necessarily want to be
Lawson
quite that
with
far
Brand
away.
Lady.
He
And
likes
Eric
where we're at because it's super sunny down the
Big
airport,
not
city, both resorts, will all three of them like. So,
and like
and
threatening, like not threatening, but
maybe if we have less
to
to do,
will
live up there. But
trying
right now
to
it
be
just does
intimidating
not
and
seem to
bullying.
be nice and getting our.
And so for that reason,
Like,
on my side, I'm like, but I'm not,
I see
I
a lot of the
can't, I
beauty
have to
in
play,
you know, the.
I'm trying to play nice. and
At the
make
end of the
that
day,
not.
you're gonna follow whatever your seller tells you to do. And so if your seller says, I don't wanna accept that addendum, then they can reject the addendum. and you can let them know that there was just a demonstration.
Yeah, but, so the financing deadline, I ran into today, some more finance, we're gonna put it today at 5.
So they're already out of their.
They
deadline anyway.
sent me their doc, the FHA addendum today, like at 3. I mean, they told us all this last minute, they sent it, seller wants to cancel, they wanted a loophole to take a cash offer, but oh my gosh, I have such anxiety.